As long as people don't hear it on the stream, I don't mind it.
See, with my headphones, it keeps me from hearing it, I think.
Okay. All right, welcome everybody. We got OP3 Crimson. He's going to be reading some of his papers on psychology. We've got beautiful Sherry here with us tonight, and of course, Mr. Wildman, myself. So, hopefully, with the stream is entertaining. And as always, we don't know how it's going to go, or we don't have a plan, but we're just going to roll with it. And so the topic tonight is psychology. So, uh,
I should have pulled out my old paper thing. I didn't realize until he told me, and I was like, okay, well,
oh,
You should.
you
got a
have a
whole.
paper on that
You should
too?
still.
I've got a paper on like everything that I took. Yeah.
Can you? I mean, would it be hard to find?
I know where it is. I just, if I'd known like 15 minutes beforehand, I would have gotten. It's in one of those sealed containers with all my school stuff,
Well,
plastic.
feel
The
free to go look for it, like when at any point.
if he hits on something that I think I have something to go with, I'll grab it. I told him I have a lot of different stuff that kind of connects back to that area, so maybe
Mhm.
just using my mind here, we can do
Yeah,
this.
my psychology papers aren't necessarily papers. Like I didn't have to do a full topic ever. It was a great class. I really enjoyed it, but I didn't have to sit down and research a topic completely and write a 10-page essay on it or more, like I did
Right,
in
it's
my
not like in the
like I did.
academic journal.
Yeah, yep, like I did in my philosophy class. But the psychology papers that I've got in front of me that I picked out are more or less journals or presentations. So they're anywhere from like 1 page up to like 4 pages. But there are a couple ones I picked out that might seem relevant or might seem interesting. I'll let uh, I'll let Cowboy and you decide.
I don't think that. I think. I mean, the way I'm looking at it is, if you've got something in your heart of those papers that drew you to those, go for it.
Well, I'll at least open up the vote for an order then. I've got one on stress factors, prejudice. Let's see.
Well, that ties
The
in with
one.
something I did study is prejudice, but we all can
I,
relate to
you know
stress
what?
factors.
It's funny. It's funny because of the two he said. I was like, yeah, stress factors. Yeah, but actually,
Prejudice.
I've
just
got
talked about my roommate about prejudice tonight. So
really.
seems to be a very prominent topic for the three of us.
Yeah, and
So
when I was telling you about I did the master's in film and society. It was actually talking. There was classes specifically on gender stereotypes, race stereotypes, just every kind of programming that was aimed at people, and movies from the 40s compared to what they were in the 2000s, like remakes and stuff, and why things changed. But a big part of it was always going back to underlying prejudices and things that would show up or programmings, and so that's why that one struck me a little bit, because everything after that first class was on that foundation.
now, is that paper that you were talking about? Like, if it hits home that you're going to go find, is that kind of what we're talking about?
Oh, I have I have stuff on that too. Goodness, if I was actually on my computer, I could probably, just because I have a hard drive with a lot of my school stuff, I could pop it up, but I'm not. Actually, it's sitting right there. All I would have to do would be to start it up and put the hard drive in it. But
Yeah, don't be lazy.
I'm like, I could
Like,
just go
he's
grab the
like,
external
he's like,
hard drive and see what
I could
papers are on
totally
there.
get it because there's my laptop, but I just have to turn it on.
Well, then I have to go in the other room and get the external hard drive, and then I have to see which papers are on the hard drive and which ones aren't. But probably what I would be looking for might be on there. So we'll see.
I would love for you to do, and we'll let
I tend to
OP
keep a
read his
lot of it in my
paper.
head, though.
Okay, well that's even better. So we'll let OP read this paper on it, and then if it strikes you to where you can do it out of like what you remember in your head, or if you feel like the need to actually dive in and get it, then we'll go from there.
I
So,
might, because you know me, I have 3 different degrees. I've got a lot of papers, and I took a lot of different
oh no.
classes too. So I've got a lot of mini papers that are shorter like
Mm.
that.
Yeah.
So
So
something's going to
OP,
hit something here.
OP. I'm just gonna say I know her. Her short papers are probably 5 to 6 pages. Those are the short ones.
Oh my God.
Well, I told him that the one that I did for my master's thesis was like 60, and then the
Wow.
normal was like 20, 30. But in the early days, like taking sociology and psychology and the beginning history classes, there were some that were like 5 to 10. So yeah, but
Yeah.
that was the first couple years, the associates years, and then they got
Mhm.
to where they were typically 20 to 30 page papers. But I know what you're yeah, I know what I would be looking for. Probably the
Right.
early years, or just sections of the later years.
So let's do this. Jesse James just showed up. We got Crystal Keith. Welcome. And let's do this. Jesse can't stay too long. So I would say if he can't stay too long, let's get to that first paper,
Yeah,
OP.
just jump in.
Okay. This was in psychology. I had journals which were completely confidential. It was just me and the teacher, and I've got some of those in here. So this will be the first time I'm revealing anything of my internal mindset to the world. And others were presentations where I did have to actually research a topic, not 60 pages worth, but I had to research the topic and present it to the class. So the first one on prejudice was a research paper, very short research paper, and I did have to present it to the class. I actually started this one with a caveat. I said, I even wrote this down. I said, I got the topic of introducing prejudice. After wrestling with the idea, I chose not to include slides, as I did not believe I could faithfully produce pictures that straddled the line between properly depicting prejudice educationally and blatantly appearing racist. So I just want to assure you all that I hate everyone equally. And that's what I said.
Hmm.
Prejudice, identifying with a particular group and falling into the subsequent cliques becomes a natural part of the human experience. Our material tastes, hobbies, likenesses, and age are just a few of the ways we find relatability to a social group in this world. Sometimes marked, noticeable traits prevail in defining that group, and sometimes not. Making collective assumptions about any group is both an evolutionary trait and extremely prejudiced. In the broad sense of the word, prejudice can be defined as a negative attitude toward people who belong to a specific social group. Prejudice is feeling that the members of other social groups are vastly different than members of your own group. This viewpoint is usually based upon mistaken assumptions regarding generalized characteristics called stereotypes. To stereotype someone is to assume that people have certain characteristics because of their affiliation within a particular group. It is, however, important to remember that in a side-by-side comparison, members of different groups actually have more in common with each other than to the contrary. To a degree, stereotyping is a natural cognitive process. Anytime our brain can simplify stimuli by referring to a prototype, and it enables us to sort out, process, and remember information with greater ease. We form these associations when the trait is noticed more frequently than not. However, the media and other social contexts sometimes influence our stereotypes by frequency of presentation. Other influencing factors that solidify stereotypes are the in group and out group effects. We grant diversity to the members within our proposed groups, yet we discount diversity in the out groups. At the extreme, ethnocentrism is prejudice gone global. The belief that one's culture or ethnic group is superior to others is both bigoted and blind. To overcome prejudices and stereotypes, a look at how and where they manifest is needed. In the most fundamental sense, prejudice may arise when there is a lack of competition for resources, a change in social conditions, or contact with members of an outgroup. Our natural tendency to remember the negative may make past transgressions by certain groups a catalyst for prejudice as well. Our prejudices manifested may be subtle, from tossing a particular applicant's resume in the trash can to sneering to physical attacks. When these attitudes root themselves in our subconscious, they become implicit attitudes or evaluations that are automatic, unintentional, and difficult to control. Ultimately, overcoming prejudices is a personal journey, spurred on by a legitimate personal desire. The goal of overcoming prejudice is to rediscover the similarities between groups and minimize the differences again. In a controlled environment, creating scenarios in which both groups become forced to cooperate to achieve a common goal can be a useful strategy. If our basic needs become jeopardized, humanity may prevail over the group's differences we only perceive in our heads. Like I said, really short, but that was it.
Mm,
That made me smile a couple times because
right.
it did relate to, like, when you're in your early years of college, like the associate's years, you have to take like a class pretty much on every area from sociology, biology, math, everything until you know what you're going to do the next 2 years of major focus on. And then I double majored. And then I did the master's, which is another, 4 to 6 years, depending on if you're doing one or two or how long it takes you. And,
Mm,
but anyway, in the early years, we were taking a sociology class, and the guy started with um, talking about that there was a big hoopla at that time because the show Survivor. Well, they had decided that particular season to break up the groups by race. So they had like the African
mm,
American tribe, the white tribe, Asians, Latino. There was like 5 groups, and so he wanted us to like watch the first episode, and I had never watched a Survivor. I'm like, really, really? So, but just to see how that actually was working out with what they were trying to do and portray, and then later on, when I came into the film and influence on society, we were specifically looking at how film through time from the beginning and radio and any type of media, computer was in there too, IT. I just gravitated more toward the film, but there was all sorts of stuff. How they specifically aimed things at the public to enhance those stereotypes and get people to fall into those pre-programmed sets of thinking. So it's really interesting there. We have a lot to discuss, but it really is all judgment. I don't think that I would think from what he was saying there is that it's more of an external than just an internal thing. We're not born with that. It's something that we are programmed into, and that I have learned most definitely.
Yeah. See, that was more or less a objective research topic, a very short research topic. Like you got me floored that you did a 60-page thesis. Good Lord, I can't compete with
Well,
the ones
when you
where
when you do your master's thesis, it's got to be that way so you could like present it because it's going in the academic journal. And if you wanted to present it at the big thing with all the academic people, you could. I didn't want to do that, but it had to be worthy of it. So you
yeah.
had a big professor with a
Well,
doctorate working with you on the paper, and that paper actually took a couple years to finish. Really, it
well,
took.
look, yeah. If you wanted to talk a subjective approach on this, I could talk prejudice, racism, stereotypes for a while because I've got my own, I think, unique take on it, and we could probably do the whole rest of the show and many more on it if you want. But I'll introduce that topic right now if you want. Um, I have a childhood that is rooted in personal experiences that uh, promote racism, not through my parents, definitely not through my parents' teachings, but through my personal experiences. And I try my best to not let that show to my children. And in fact, I don't let that show to my children. I let them make up their own minds, and I promote equality and I promote all that jazz and nonsense and everything to them. But I want to make sure they make up their own minds. But my topic is racism and stereotypes are not proper, but they're natural. And what I mean is, in a purely scientific approach, if you encounter something that happens, your mind will naturally start to associate things with that experience. You say, okay, I've had a negative experience with this group of people, this topic more than 50% of the time, so it's naturally going to happen later on. Now, what you do with those actions and that mindset defines how bad of a problem you have. But what I'm saying is, I've had nothing but negative past experiences with God, I hate to say this on air, but with African Americans, and that's because I've been beat up on my school bus for standing up for my sister after she had condoms filled with lotion thrown at her and eggs thrown at her by African Americans. I've been
Oh,
chased.
goodness.
I've been chased down the block by black people just because I stood up for her. I was initiated in a game of, I think it's called Bluebird, without my knowing, where all of a sudden I just got started being punched in the chest by a black person named Roosevelt back in um, 96, 90, no, 94, I think. And apparently to win this game I had to say Bluebird, and I didn't even know the rules, and I was just getting punched in the chest. I've had experience after experience after experience with black people, and this was
Well,
Georgia, this was Texas.
just so you don't feel like you're hanging here, Cowboy, you remember when I told you about that experience at the gas station and my boyfriend wouldn't come in with me and there was two guys in there and the guy said, "I can't find what cigarettes you're looking for. Come back in the back room." And it was like this big cement wall filled with cigarettes. And he was looking at me and he wasn't facing the cigarettes. And so I figured they must be near my head, just peeking in the door. And then one guy was behind me, and the other guy, and then the other guy like flipped his head because he had talked to my boyfriend outside, like telling him someone was out there. And I said, "Well, where are they?" I said, "This is what they look like." And he pointed, and I said, "Well, if you're looking at my head, then you can see them because they're right next to me." And I ran back to the register, paid for my stuff, and got out of there. But that experience was with two African American guys, and my boyfriend was upset, not with me, but because he had been through this before. And I said to him, "Well, you can't judge everybody and you can't be mad at me." He said, "I'm not mad at you," but he had been through what you'd been through so many times that it was just, he kind of figured, why would you put yourself in that situation to go in there? I was like, "Well, I figured you would come in with me, but it could have been anybody." But to him, he'd seen it so many times that it couldn't have been anybody. He was thinking that way from his experience. You know what I'm saying?
Right, right. My
So he
experience has
wasn't
definitely
mad
been
at me. He
nurtured.
was mad at that this kept happening in his life with women around him,
Hmm. Hmm.
where he had to stand up
I
to
think
a
I'm
certain group of people.
I think I'm old enough now to look back on it and with a discerning eye and say I cannot be prejudiced and I cannot stereotype, but I still have that feeling that I have to be more careful. I have to make these associations. And what I said earlier is it's not right, but it's natural. It can happen with anyone, and this goes back to like us learning about survival in the ancient times. You know, if you see that this particular animal is going to attack this way, then you naturally learn to defend against that attack, or you naturally learn to avoid that attack. It's just it's natural. It's not right, but it's natural.
Well, it could also be, though, I mean, when you say natural and we're talking in a scientific way like you are, then you have to go to environment too, because let's say you're out of that environment and you're in college and you're in a different, totally different type of environment, and you start realizing, "Oh, okay, what I dealt with, a lot of people don't ever deal with, so they're not thinking that way." Um, you know what I mean? But you still went through it, so you have to reconcile within yourself that forgiveness and realize that it could have even happened. Situations like that actually do happen even with white people, as far as, being thrown eggs at and condoms and horrible things that teenagers and younger kids do, junior high and teenagers, they just do. Um, so it could have been a different group of people. Now, if it had been a whole different group of people the entire time, would your mind have done the same thing? Probably. With your supposition, it
Okay.
would, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't want to dwell on this one too much because we could probably progress to others.
No, I'm just kind of moving toward forgiveness. That's all.
Yeah, and I've had a great experience later on in life with some of my best friends being black. In fact, my I would actually say to this day my absolute best friend is a black person I've never met, and he's been on PS4 with me since back when we made clans and groups, like Call of Duty and all sorts of stuff. He's the smartest person I've ever known, and the only person that can keep up with me in my drunken stupor with my philosophical ideas and everything. And I love him to death. And yeah, he's definitely not your typical. Damn, I hate saying that. He's just a great.
Yeah, see, I was about to catch that just there. Because
Yeah,
you say you're typical, but
yeah.
then you're like,
I stopped myself.
maybe he is.
But no,
Maybe you ran into some atypical.
exactly. So yeah, he's my best friend ever, and I'd love to meet him someday and say hi to his wife and his kid, and yeah, and all that. So
And also, kids do mean things. I really wasn't a mean kid, but I wasn't really there enough to be, nobody really picked on me, and nobody really, I didn't really pick on anybody. I just wasn't there enough. So I kind of just slid through. But I saw a lot of things, and everybody does in high school and that sort of thing, and growing up. And it's kind of like you think back, and a lot of people hold on to that like into their later years. But when you look back on it, you're like, well, were those people being pressured? What situation were they going through where they were upset with themselves or unhappy at home? And then you think, well, they're older now, and they may have, come to Christ and come to religion and come to forgiveness. And why would you? And if you're still holding on to it, then at that point, the only one you're hurting is yourself. And I'm not talking to you. I'm just talking in general.
it's fine, and I know, I believe you.
I mean, like the universal you. Sometimes I do that, and people think I'm talking to them.
Sure, sure. Okay, so what else I've got is this one might ring through. I've got one called Where It All Went Wrong, where I try to associate the internet as being the cause of a lot of the grief for today. I say
Okay, that
it.
goes along with my film and internet and social media studies too. Okay.
Okay, it's only about 2.5 pages long, but this was a journal, so this was one of the ones I've never really shared, but I think I've talked about it before to people and tried to convince people, but this was what I wrote down. I call it where it all went wrong. In my title, it refers particularly to humanity, and from the rest of the context clues, it would stand to reason that I hold a rather pessimistic view of the current world rather than an optimistic one. I have always stated that my stance is of a realist position, not pessimistic, but let's face it, I'm not convincing anyone that I don't abhor where society is heading. I titled this journal with the goal of navigating the reader through my train of thought to arrive at the cause of the world's grief, the internet. The information superhighway is and was the catalyst for the quickening pace of the corruption of society and its eventual downfall. I have prioritized my argument into two cause and effect facets. The internet has become a loudspeaker for the world's youth, who also predominantly make up the majority of the internet's traffic. I submit for reasoning the universal parental anecdote of the two toughest times in a child's life to endeavor as a parent: the 0 to 3 year old time frame and the teenage years. Practically every child that enters teenagerdom develops a certain few characteristics, not the least of which being insubordinate. At this time in a child's life, rebellion, self exploration, egocentrism, and overall unruliness are most likely to surface. These emotions were at one time dealt with by parents and instilling of moral values. Nowadays, parents seem to be content allowing their child to hide out in their room until dinner. It is in this bedroom and on these smartphones we give to our teens where the problem arises. A teenager in angst will always find solace in venting their frustration to anybody that will listen and understand. The internet has become the perfect tool for these young voices to be heard, much to the annihilation of the moral norms of society. But why is one teenager that is on their computer or phone telling everyone how much their life sucks a problem? The answer is because teenagers and masses make up the majority of the internet traffic. I don't have to convince anyone that older people and technology don't go together like oil and water, and any adult seen crying on the internet is displaying, wait for it, childlike behavior. This number this numbers argument, I don't know why I wrote that. This numbers argument should sufficiently fuel the rest of my debate. Also present on the internet are polls, comment sections, likes counters, personalized advertising, blogs, and iconic YouTube commentators. In a perpetual motion style machine, the youth of the generation have become the majority opinion by sheer volume alone. Imagine a world where hatred for public education, free government care for everybody, and homosexuality tolerance have become commonplace. Well, you don't have to imagine very far. The implications of a teenage mind controlling the world are dooming. The second implication is the laziness factor. The internet indirectly represents instantaneous communication, also foretold in Revelations, by the way. Technology in general has always made the pleasures of life come quicker with less physical effort, but to add instantaneous to the recipe, disaster is cooking. The birth of instantaneous communication has given rise to countless inventions and other complacency inducing pleasures of life. Your great grandparents can hark to an older time when they had to work for their food instead of buying it prepackaged at a supermarket. Your parents remember handwriting a pen pal and patiently waiting for a reply. And now, kids get texted by their parents from the kitchen to the bedroom to say food's ready instead of walking just a few feet. Supermarkets can now deliver your food to you with the help of the internet. We have become an instant gratification nation. None of us know the value of any patience. Any values we embrace can be found in the media, mirroring the actors and figureheads that get the most airtime because they get the most views. Take a general look around and see for yourself. Is the nation and the world becoming more centered around the demands of a spoiled, whiny, transcendently idealistic atheist teenager? I know so. And that was it.
Okay, can I make a couple comments? Because
No.
that was pretty interesting.
Yes.
No, no, seriously. Because I know that you and I probably both were already into the late teen years when just dial up AOL was coming out. I know that for a fact. So we didn't really grow up in that generation you're speaking of. But okay, the same like you're talking about kids venting their frustrations, and then you have mean kids who say mean things and then it gets around to everybody. Now, those things still happened before, and everybody's generation, they were still happening, except now we just see it more apparently because of the internet. But it still was going on, like the story you told earlier about people picking on other people in school. It's just magnified now because they're like, oh, the whole school's going to know. Well, we grew up with the whole school was going to know too, but just it's a different way. And there are some cases, like when you talk about people having food delivered to the house. Now, yeah, that could be a laziness issue and it could make people not go out to the stores and shop and things close down. But it could also be a good thing if, let's say, someone's disabled and they have the ability then to pick out what they need and have that either brought to them or they can drive up and not have to go without it because they can't do it. So I think it has to do with responsible using. And when you're talking about kids, parents' responsibility of what, if they're going to give their kid that phone or that tablet in their off time and at what age, and making sure they know what they're looking at, that disconnection that you were talking about. But that was there before too. So I think it's just kind of showing society's problems in a maybe larger light that were already there. Would you agree?
Yeah, there's definitely a sense of responsibility that's come with the internet and being a parent and all that. And I've had a chance to evolve my position over the years. This was written in 2014, so I've had
Well,
5 years.
yeah, a lot of my stuff's older too, so I get it.
Right, right. I still believe that the presence of the youth on the internet does make a more significant impact these days. Just by that number alone, it's like you ever heard the phrase "children are meant to be seen and not heard"?
Yes, that's like
Old,
a.
old,
It makes
old,
me
old
think of
phrase.
the 40s and the 50s. Yeah,
Right, right. Old, old, old phrase. Yes, but I do
but I've heard it.
feel there's something to that. Not necessarily back in the day when literally there was dinner and the kids were around and they were meant to literally be seen and not heard, just the adults were having conversation, but yet somewhat similar. It's like childlike mentality and childlike behavior and childlike morals are prevailing these days only because they're given a mouthpiece, and simply by the
Well,
sheer
there is
volume
two
and the
sides though
number.
to the seen and not heard because then you get a chance to they get a chance to observe. Oh. somebody's got a okay, they get a chance to observe what's going on around them and take it in and reflect on it, but then they started to have issues that that particular generation has huge issues, a majority of them, I'm not going to say all, but with expressing themselves and their emotions and how they're feeling because they did grow up that way. Now we're kind of going to the extreme opposite side where every little thing that they feel has to be heard right now. You know, can't just take a day and sit on it. You're going to put something out
Right.
and then
Well, what about this?
regret it later because they didn't wait and calm down.
Have you ever heard? Oh, I forgot who wrote this, but have you ever heard the quote? If you're not voting Democrat by 18, you have no heart. If you're not voting Republican by 25, you have no brain.
Only once, and I think it was maybe on this stream, so I think you're the one that said it, so I'm going to say no.
Actually, I don't think I've ever said it on this stream, but okay.
Okay, somebody on Cowboy Stream said that same exact thing one time.
Okay. Well, it's a thing, and basically, as you grow up,
So that's the
your
second time I've
morals.
heard it.
Okay. Well, as you grow up, your priorities change, your morals change. It's kind of like that's why we have a voting age. That's why we have a liquor age. That's why we
Which
have
has
a
changed
right,
multiple
right.
times.
But it's there's a lot of seriousness to that. It's like when you're 18, when you're 14, 15, basically 14 through 18 pretty much. You're driven by your heart. And yes, you can't fault Democrats. You can't fault liberals for wanting to be all inclusive and wanting to think that the world
Well,
is a utopia.
yeah, you're
And
talking about idealism in a world, though, that is not uh, a world where there is still a lot of sin and misunderstandings and non forgiveness. So when you think of it that way, it's a natural progression. You would hope that people would not just not just close up their heart and just think with their brain, but be able to combine the two as they get older and have gone through more life experience.
right, exactly. Yeah. But uh, you can't discount the fact that through life there are natural tendencies as you progress in age. You know, you get older, and eventually you'll reach a point in life where you're just looking back on it and saying, um, I should have done different, and
Right, but if you had, then you wouldn't come to where you are now, and that's why we can't really always fault the younger generation because when you think back, we were there too, and we were idealistic, and we came to a certain point where our perspectives on things changed about what was important and how to approach certain situations. So
right,
while they're still going through that, just like in the 70s with the parents and the kids, it's been with every generation. They're like, oh, these kids, what are they doing? And then they grow up and they grow out of it. So we have to respect that they're just going through that time.
yes, but I think, like I was saying earlier in my paper, I think that the fact that children, kids, teenagers, etc., make up a lot of the internet traffic and the communications and the tweets, it's therefore accepted as the majority that
Well, also,
childlike.
I can support your point on this because they used to say that the baby boomers were the biggest generation, but the millennials have now, or Generation Z, I'm not sure, one of the two, has now officially outnumbered the baby boomers. So they're the largest generation we've seen in a long, long time.
Uh-huh.
So that adds to some of that. And I do remember because dial up AOL internet, with that coming out, you know, when I was in my late teens, I did have a friend who got so involved in that and like chat rooms and stuff. And, you know, I would check things on Instant Messenger a little bit. It's way different back then than it was now. It was way different. But still, it was mostly, you know, kids. And then, you know,
Sure.
uh,
All right, I've got
Hey,
another.
Terry,
Oh.
Chad, I want to interrupt real quick. And I'll
I
let
was
you,
actually done with the point, but yeah.
yeah, I just want to interrupt real quick and I'll let you guys get back to it. I'm sorry. Redwords Lou says he loves
Lou!
you. and that he's going live. He can't stay; he had to leave, and he's going live tomorrow morning from 9 to 11. So
Yes, he did. He let everyone know about the Discord and that he's on tdcradio.com.
yeah, he mentioned TTC, but not Discord. So
Yeah, it's actually connected because the Discord you can chat with other people while you're watching the show and have it still playing in the background, and it's like a way to communicate with the whole network. I've never seen it used that way before, and it really works. But so if you do have Discord and you can look up TDC Radio, then Redward's Lou's show will be on there, and the show that I have that's not started yet because my computer needs synced up, and Rob's show, One Long Minute, and there's some other shows, and they're all listed there. But if you want to hear it playing, Lou has his own website called isloucreations.com. But anytime for TDC, you just go to tdcradio.com, and you'll see a little picture like a blue guy, and you click that or go down and hit live, and if someone's live you'll hear it live. So otherwise it'll just play old episodes. But at that time, if you go on there and you click on it, he will be live in the morning tomorrow. He does most every morning. So yeah, except for Sundays, I think. But you'd have to check. I think his website has his whole list, and Discord does as well for TDC Radio on Discord. That's my plug. Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
if you guys want to get back to what you were talking about,
No,
I'm sorry.
I love Lou. So he's got a really good show, and he does a lot of Bible readings and some studies, and some of the other shows are a little different, but there's something for everybody over there. So
Yeah,
yeah, but like what was the last thing was about yeah,
yeah,
about that it did start out as mainly teenagers. And the thing is, when it first came out, there was a whole, the issues that are going on now were even bigger as far as, um, the bad stuff like pedophiles and stuff, because there was a lot of chat rooms that were aimed at kids, like probably Nick at Night chat rooms, Nickelodeon based chat rooms, gamer type chat rooms that were mainly kids that played it, but there was also some people in their early 20s. Um, a lot of places where you would expect to find kids were a lot more centralized back in the day, and you would have people come in pretending to be kids. And I found out on my own one time at 16 that this guy I was talking to was, in his 50s. So it was very creepy moment, and I went through that on the internet. And now there's more watch on that, and it's more of a bigger known thing. But when that's something else that the internet helped to propel. But on the other side, I can say that there are positive things, because people all over the world, like you said, in an instant can hear something. And I've been on streams where, people from China or South Africa or places where it's really restricted get to hear the gospel because they're tuning into these shows we're doing over here, that people are doing over here.
Mm-hmm.
So there's two sides to that. It's about being careful with AI type technology, and people don't usually think of the internet that way, but it's very, very close, wouldn't you say,
Sure, I do.
to getting people used to that type of technology. The internet was a huge tool, right?
Yeah. Well, we could
And
do
how
a
do you
whole
feel about
show.
that?
We could do a whole
yeah,
show on each of these, but these are just kind of general readings.
yeah,
Well, yeah,
absolutely.
I'm just trying to bring it all back so that we make sure we get all our points in about them.
Sure.
What you know,
Okay.
if
Yeah,
there's anything
the
else you want to
internet,
say.
the
Yeah, we
internet
could.
is. I mean, you can look at it, www, right? The blah blah blah. It is a platform. It's an AI. It is Satan's domain, right? Uh, it has pushed all of the evilness. Yet, what the beautiful part about it is that we cannot discredit is that God uses evil for good. such as we're
He
all
can use
here,
anything. Yes.
right?
Yes.
And so we are here today on what? Satan's evil tool of the internet to talk about God. That's the beautiful part of it, right?
Exactly. Yep.
Absolutely.
I've had time to fine tune my stance on some of these, and it's been, like I said, 5 years. I mean, imagine having a stance on something 5 years ago, and then later you've had time to reflect on that and change, and you've had life experiences through that. Yeah, this was 5 years ago.
Yeah, you should read some of my stuff from, if I let's see, I could go all the way back to 13 years ago because I was in school for a while with the master's degrees. I was in until 2012.
Uh
So
huh.
yeah. So things if I did go back and read something from, let's say, when I was like 22, 23, it would be much different. I'm pretty sure.
All right. Well, I've got one that is a take on something that could be 50% of today's population with the divorce rate. It's basically concerning how a father figure can relate to the disciplinary actions of his new girlfriend's children.
That's interesting. Okay.
Okay, I call it good dad, bad dad, controlling dad, not dad. I live with my girlfriend Angela and her two boys, Max, recently turned 7, and Sebastian, recently turned 4. My own son, also named Max, and also 7, lives with us some of the time due to my divorce decree. Although I could write a book about my relationship with my own son, I want to concentrate this journal on my multifaceted relationship that I am cultivating with her two boys. It's a fine line I walk when asserting the same parental method I exercise with my own son on her two boys. I was raised fairly strict, yet still I rebelled, by a colonel and a registered nurse. Only later in life do I see the wisdom in my parents' teachings. I encounter little to no resistance when raising my own son Max the way I want, but I have to walk on eggshells sometimes when it comes to disciplining her boys. The disciplining and general morals are basically the only issues. I'll admit I've inherited my father's temper, and I'll take a personal minute to calm down if I see red. But short of blowing my stack, I still prefer a relationship built on respect and discipline. I can't stand unruly children, and I want to do my part for the world to not have outbreaks in public and meltdowns with friends. To me, a child's behavior is a reflection of a parent's ethics, morals, resolve, character, etc. In the boys' defense, they aren't that bad. All in all, we've got some pretty easy kids. They have their moments and their quirks, but I thank God that we're blessed with a pretty good family. In an attempt to set an understanding with Angie early on, I told her that I understand kids will be kids, and I do expect some unacceptable scenarios to surface. Kids will lie to parents, color on the walls, spill drinks, break dishes, and miss the toilet altogether. I pleaded with her to work with me because I know I would get angry, but I would try to be understanding. I asked for this initial aid because they're not my boys. I can't swat them like I've had to with my own son. In fact, I can hardly raise my voice at either of them, which is why this particular journal became more than just a thought. I awoke from a nap to hear her Max fiddling with a trash can lid that I had literally just repaired the day before with new springs. He had somehow caused both springs to pop off and had separated. Oh, I lost. Oh, that's Cowboys. Okay, okay. Cowboys quiet now. He had somehow caused both springs to pop off and had separated the lid from its cradle. I didn't yell, but I did raise my voice, and while I was fixing it, I told him I couldn't see how he caused this. I told him, you just press the button and the lid pops open. Then press the lid down to close it. It's that simple. I told him I would tell my son the same thing had he messed it up too. Later, I was approached by Angie, who informed me that I had scared her son. I too got upset at that point. I told Angie that I can't stand the boys being babied, and if he has a problem with me, he should come to me himself. I told her it feels like I have to walk on eggshells anytime I have to step in with her boys. Anytime I even remotely discipline either of her boys, I glance at Angie to see if I've upset her. She yells at them more often and harsher than I do. Her brother disciplines them and swats them when they're unruly. Everybody but me enjoys a repercussion free, strict relationship with her boys except me. Granted, they aren't my own flesh and blood, but I am with them more than their own father. They live under my roof, utilize my utilities, and draw on my walls, so why shouldn't I be able to exercise a little control over my environment? I'm not asking to cage them or beat anybody with a hickory stick. I'm just asking for a little leeway when I get rightfully upset. I don't want to have to constantly look to Angie for approval for my actions. To me, it's an insult to question my methods, especially when I feel I am asking for so little. We did reconcile that particular incident. We sort of compromised by having Angie bring Max to me and wink at me to let me know he's a little hurt, but then I would be allowed to restate my intentions firmly, yet lovingly, when I'm not in the heat of the moment. This is probably just an issue that we will continue to work on as long as communication is present. I want to be a part of these boys' lives, but on the other hand, I do not want to be a doormat. It's a precarious quagmire. That's it.
Okay. Do you mind me asking how long ago this one was written?
2014.
Okay, so over a little bit of time, is there anything you can add to that? Did it
Yeah.
continue on that way? Did it get worse, or what was your experience?
It's great that I read something that's this old because it has changed for the better. Um, I think the boys respect me for what I try to bring to the table. They know that I don't hate them. They know that I'm trying to teach them, and they know that they don't get that from their actual dad when they do get to spend time with him.
Now, at this
Um,
point, was the situation fairly new to them, like as far as you being in that position?
it was about 3 years into it, 2 to 3 years.
Okay. But you said the one was 7, so maybe in that one situation, like, oh, I accidentally broke the trash can, and then he's probably already embarrassed and upset and thinks you're going to get mad, and then it's like, you
Yeah,
know, it just I've even had incidents where it was like, oh, you just do this, and suddenly that happens. It's a new one of these newfangled ones, So that kind of made me smile. But as far as in that situation when you pretty much are the father figure. Now, I don't know whether you two were married or not. I would,
or common law
but
marriage.
okay. Well, you're pretty much dad. So after a few years, I would think that you should be treated that way and be able to relate to them as you would your own son, because like you said, they're in your house. You are the provider, and you are the male influence there that is going to help to shape them. So
Oh yeah,
you don't want to like have your son be more favored and hers feel like, oh, we're not really his. So you do want to treat them all equally. You know what I mean?
things have got a lot better since then. Um,
Well, good. Let's talk about that for a minute.
yeah. Back in the day, I used to know the only way that we would get into a nasty fight was when I told her how I felt about her raising her own kids. And nowadays, it has evolved to the point where she understands that they're not just her kids, they're my kids too. So things have gotten way better. And I
Right.
really
It's kind of like
time.
using that as you may have been using that unconsciously or even sometimes consciously if you were upset to get to her in a moment of anger, making the kids kind of in the middle but not really a part of your own personal argument. And then when you both were putting in 100%, 100%, this is our family, things would change, and then you wouldn't say, you would sit down together maybe and say, what are we going to do about this?
Yeah.
Did
But,
that happen? Hopefully.
well, I've still never swatted them, but I do feel like I have a better prominence over what goes on in this house, and yet we're still 50-50 equal. If she and
Right,
I
but you
talk,
don't say your kids anymore. Do you just say the kids?
it's kind of a mix. It really is. I have told her, and I have told her boys that I do love them. Um, I tell my son I love him all the time, but I've told her boys that I do love them. It's not on a as commonplace as my own son because my own son is my flesh and blood. But
Okay, so I'm going to put myself in this situation and say it's not entirely on you. It would be on the woman too, as the way she talks to the boys about your position in their life. Like, you have to listen to your dad, is what you would say at that point, you know?
Yeah, yeah, pretty much. She has
And
given
yeah,
she's
and
given
make
me the
that make
leeway.
them more comfortable with, this is a unit family, we're not divided. Yeah.
Exactly. Things have gotten a lot better since I wrote this.
Well, no, sometimes it's good to hear the before and the after, and give some outside perspective. I'm like, okay, if I was in that situation as the woman, I would want the kids to know, if I'm bringing this person in permanently, that they're going to have to listen. Like, if I'm not there and, it's just the three kids, and you're watching the kids, then what you say goes. And even if I am there and something happens and you say something, they're not going to turn to me and be like, "But mom," and try to turn the two people against each other.
Right.
That's one of those early conversations, I think, that sometimes gets bypassed, and that is an important factor.
Yep. I mean, even just today, I've got a thing where I've shown the boys how much I pay for freaking electricity, and yet they still leave lights on. So when I catch one of them leaving a light on in their bedroom, I'll find out who it was, and I'll make them stand in a corner, facing the corner, for as many minutes as they are years old. And it just happened today. But they listened to me. They didn't do it with any guff, and it worked out. So
Well, and it also, the way you explained about how you were raised plays a factor too, because, like, I was one of those kids probably that just, I'd leave the bathroom light on, and I'd go to sleep. I'd leave the light on. I wouldn't think too much about it. I did realize that it wasn't free. I just, sometimes you don't think about it, like, you're getting up, you're going to school, you just don't think about it sometimes. But if it's been brought up to you, you know, and then all the lights are on and everyone's asleep, it's 2 in the morning, all the lights are on, you know, that's a little different. But I do understand the kids' position there too, because it's not something. Because even if you do show them the bill, it depends what age they are, whether or not they can understand that this is not free just because it's here all the time for us to use.
yeah,
Just
well,
because it's my room in the house, the
right.
kid doesn't understand that.
Well,
That
that's
doesn't mean they can leave their light on all the time.
I've got a fairly unique situation because the 12-year-old of hers is smart enough to realize that, and her who's currently 9, is just a prodigy. He's a genius, and it's going to be very interesting how he grows up. He's going to be one of the best minds I've ever seen because he is literally a prodigy.
Yeah,
And
I would say I was pretty smart young, and I taught myself, and I got my degree at like 15, 16. I had to wait till I was 16, but so I knew some things, but then still at the heart of a child, that carried on, you know, past 18 into my early 20s, where sometimes I was naive about certain things. I was very book smart and very smart, but sometimes just worldly smart. I it was more of that childlike thing. I just didn't give it up for a long time. So it's kind of about, you have to learn. I would say, with each kid, you love them differently, and you learn how they are differently. And then, because sometimes putting something one way to all three of the kids isn't going to work. You might have to put it a different way in your methods to each one. You know what I'm saying?
hmm
Yeah, because one might totally understand the thing about, here's the bill, and then the other one might be like, what
No,
now?
they all understood it because I asked all of them to collect all of their money that they had from birthdays and from Christmas and everything, and they brought it to me. And I said, if I were to charge you my monthly bill just this month alone, y'all would still be short by $60.
And
And
then what did one of them say? Well, that's your part that you use, right?
no,
I'm
no,
just
no,
kidding. I'm just
none of
kidding.
them said that. No,
I'm
no.
just lighting it up. I'm just because they're all below teenage years right now. So one day you might hear something like that.
Well, in my defense, you got to work with the tools you have, and when something doesn't work, you got to change up your repertoire. You got to change up what you're going to use, and
Yeah, because based on the ages, because mine, let's see, my nephew's 12. He's going to be 13 in August, but it's like, it's like they're, I don't know, it's like they're older now. Do you know what I'm saying? In this generation, they do know more by that age now.
they really do. And I could talk about that at length with like the desensitization to blood and gore and crime and that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah. Me
That's
and
a
my
whole other day.
sister were actually talking about that, and because she said, we would watch a show together at night that she watches, and she'd watch it with him, and she'd brought up a couple shows that were popular, and she said there was this one show, and it was the show on Fox that's now on Netflix called Lucifer, and I said no.
I
Because
hate.
I had seen it. I said, you don't even start. You don't even want to go down that path because it's horrible, blasphemous, bloody, nasty. She's like, okay, so there's certain things that I will give my opinion on, but I can only go so far. So I gave him some movies that I thought were age appropriate and had good messages around Christmas time. And I said, do you promise that you'll give this a try? If you don't like it, you don't have to watch it again, but it might turn out to be your favorite movie?
Hmm.
And he did, because I wanted to try to get him to do something even other than just, you know, being on his PlayStation or his phone. Something that might make him think a little bit, or have situations where you have boys that are outside together having adventures together or dialogues together in a more social way that we did when we were younger, like just
I'm
going
just
outside.
I'm just trying to get them to be that way. It's like pulling teeth to force them to go outside and play in the woods and build forts and stuff. It's like all they
Yeah,
want
and
to do
it's like with us, well, at least with me, when I was a kid, we'd have to be called in. It'd be like 11 at night. It's like, all right, it's time to come in. And then we'd be like, well, can't we just camp out in so and so's backyard? It was
is.
one of those things. We never wanted to come in,
We'd be
until
we'd be
like
arguing about the
15,
nature of daylight.
16.
No, it's still light outside, bitch. It's pitch black.
Yeah, we were still playing like kick the can at 14, and then getting together and just hanging out. And if it got too late, I'd be like, well, whose house can we all go to?
Okay.
Or
All right. Well, I've got another one. Um, I called this Dark Passenger. Man, it's only 2 pages long.
well, give us a little more of a premise there,
Um,
just
it,
briefly.
I think it harkens to back when Dexter was on Netflix.
Okay. So
Yeah.
kind of ties into what, like,
Yeah. I'm
Lucifer.
not. I'm not a murderer, serial killer, or anything like that, but I do have my own dark passenger, a person that I don't let out to the rest of the world. And I can't believe this is only 2 pages. I could probably write a lot more on it. So I haven't read
Yeah,
this
I
in a
can,
while.
this is going to be something we can talk about. So yeah, go ahead.
Okay. It says, I haven't kept a journal in many years. I guess as my sense of privacy developed and grew stronger, I saw the flaw in leaving a document showing my inner workings in any other place other than my own locked mind. I had claimed in class that I approached psychology without any pertinent pressing questions, and that I was just there to learn what I can, and to add my own repertoire. What I had not revealed is that I am consciously or subconsciously going to use what I learn as a tool. When we discussed potential benefits of psychology, I felt as if the only elephant in the room was the fact that knowing how someone worked can be utilized to control an individual. Like it or not, I think of those things. I wouldn't say that I'm a dark person. I am, in fact, a great father and have learned the value of communicating in a relationship, as I'm demonstrating with my girlfriend of a year and a half. My marriage ended because of multiple errors, but the biggest contributing factor was my unwillingness to communicate. I have paid for people's meals randomly and sometimes attended Catholic Mass. I share a unique relationship with God that few get to experience, but on the other side of me lies a manipulative, controlling person that loves the shock value. I had heard the term selective morality defined for me and found I fit that descriptor. My morals and values change like a chameleon to best fit my needs at any particular moment. Do I like this person inside me? Not one bit. But there he lies. I wouldn't be where I am today without the careful planning, detail oriented, self preserving, judgmental, and aloof other me. This person knows how to get exactly what he wants and how to wrench a desired response from others. This person has paid much attention to word choice, vocal pitch and attenuation, reading faces, and summing up a person and categorizing them in a matter of minutes. When he cannot elicit a desired response, he resorts to a favorite tool in his arsenal, the shock factor. Words and phrases that wake up the person because they couldn't fathom that being said in a casual conversation. Since I own my own personal yin and yang, both of which have the best of intentions at heart, it begs the question, am I so evil? And that was it, 2 pages.
Okay. So I think everybody, and I think this is a really good thing, because everybody can relate to this, because we've all, at some point in our lives lied or manipulated, or, even as kids, taken something or stolen something, or, any of those type of things, that, or use the Lord's name in vain, or, just things or thoughts that we have that we don't necessarily like, parts of our personality that, in our walk with Christ, thinking about it this way, as we go and we go through the sanctification process and we continue walking and developing that personal relationship with Jesus, we die to those parts of our personality because they're naturally there, that human sinful nature. And as we start shedding more of that off, it becomes, you can see if someone's producing fruit or not, but being able to say that we all have issues and that we've all done bad things, and we all fall short of the glory of God, and there's none of us righteous, not one, and that's why we need our Savior, to be able to just openly express how we're feeling, and that we've done those type of things, with knowing how to manipulate people. I understand that. It's not something that I do anymore. When I did know how to do that, but where did it get me? The whole thing was just the growth, and being able to express that, I think, ties in really well with how we choose to either mature and develop and die to those things, or stay stagnant and lukewarm and on the fence.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
It's a part of me that I'm not proud of, but I can I can elicit if I give enough energy into it and thought to it, I can elicit the response I want. I can let's see, how do I put it? Like if I wanted money from my parents, I could probably formulate a tweet or a Facebook post that talks about my shitty situation that causes them to want to give me money. If I wanted to cause a person to think the way I do, I could probably formulate a string of characters and a string of words that makes them think the way I want. And I'm not proud of that, but I can do it. It's underhanded and it's methodical, but
see, if you could turn that to the positive, though, then you can point out when other people are doing the same. Couldn't you?
oh yeah, I can tell when people are trying. Oh God, yeah, I can tell when someone's
I knew
and
you were going to say that.
yeah, there's something about a Virgo that we can tell when someone's being honest or not, and we can really root out when someone is being truthful within the first 60 seconds of meeting them. First impressions are everything.
Well, I don't know about that. I've actually had, some first impressions where I probably had the wrong impression about the person, for bad or for good. It turned out to be the flip opposite sometimes. That's not always the case. And as far as the astrology, like I said, I kind of leave that out of it now. because it's just not really accurate. And it's also, when you get into horoscopes, then you get into the other types of like lesser magic, which if you're talking about manipulating someone consciously, that could be kind of on those lines of using your words and your intelligence to get someone to react the way you want them to without them knowing, which could also fall into that area as well. So, and it's something that people do. We just do it as people sometimes
Yeah,
without realizing it. But once we do realize it, it's how we deal with it after that point,
right,
knowing that
right.
we
And
could,
that's done.
but choosing not to.
That's done within complete reason, though. I've never used that ability to put someone into complete financial debt. I've never used that ability to screw someone over. It's more selfish, and I hate that, but it's literally more selfish.
Well,
But
I
I
was
do.
actually applauding you because we all have our, whatever it is, our sins, because no one's perfect. So, and it all does come back to pride or selfishness, and pride is selfishness. It's the ultimate selfishness.
Right.
So, yeah, we all have those type of things. And what I was saying is, the hardest part is admitting it and then getting past it and then looking back and saying, you know what? I'm not that person anymore, you know?
I wish I could say that, but it still goes on to this day, and
Well,
all
we're
the
all we're all at different points, and like I said, you can also use that for good if you figure out ways to do so where you're not doing it, but you can identify people who are actually trying to mislead other people, like even
well.
false
Let me
prophets
give you
and people
let me
doing
give you
things with wrong motives.
let me give you something very unique to me that I'd love to say was Virgo, but I can't completely elicit that. I can't support that. I was
Just
saved
say it's you.
years. I, I was saved years and years and years ago, back in '97, something like that, at a church revival, whatever. And I got saved, and it was the most amazing feeling ever. The most amazing feeling ever. I would do anything to go back to that feeling. I was able to see the world with a much brighter vision. I could literally see colors brighter than they were before. And I was given a gift at that moment where I could tell whether people were real about their emotions or whether they were hiding something. I could basically tell when someone was trying to cheat me or further their own selfishness. And that I've had that to this day. It's kind of waned just a little bit, but I've had that to this day. So I'd like to say it was an astrology thing, but I think it was a
I
God given
would
gift.
say that was of the Holy Spirit.
I would too, because that was the context. What happened was I went to a church revival, and it was a huge arena, and there was a band playing, there was a pastor talking, and they were creating different circles within the audience of people with someone in the middle that wanted to be saved and laid hands upon, and that person would be saved. And I never got my chance in the circle in the arena to be saved. And outside afterwards, I had told the pastor of the church I was going to I didn't get my chance in the circle, and everyone surrounded me at that point, and they laid hands on me, and he said a prayer, and then I was just friggin' elated at that point. I was just absolutely changed, elated right there, and it lasted for a good 48 hours. I'm so sad to say it lasted for 48 hours, but
Yeah,
I
mine was a more personal experience, and the thing is, we all have gifts that we know aren't of us, that are higher than that. And like I said, it's about how we decide to use them. And sometimes, people, let's say people who have the gift of maybe seeing into other people's lives, or like with the gift of wisdom or knowledge. Now that person could become prideful, not giving the credit to God and giving it to themselves, and they could become prideful, or they could become more humbled by it. It just depends. And I think that grows as we continue walking. But there's some people who, you know, some people like the parable of the talents in the Bible. There's some who bury the talent and never use it at all. And, God's like, I gave it to you so that you could use it. And then there's people who, might misuse it, but then they realize, that's not the right thing, and they continue on and they use it for good. But I think the part that worries me is the one who would bury the talent or like be lukewarm on the fence. It's like if God's given you something, there's something good you can do with it. And I
Yeah.
think I get this feeling that that gift can also help you detect when someone does need prayer, when someone does need you to reach out, when something is going on, you could totally use that instead of inward, like you were saying, how we can put things towards selfish. If you put it outward toward other people in an empathetic way, that could be an amazing thing. And I see you going there with it.
No,
So I
you're
think
you're
that's
not
pretty
you're
cool.
not off mark. You're definitely not off mark. I have the worst thing you can call me is unneeded or useless, and I have prided myself in helping people out with their relationships and their own problems, and I love talking with people one on one and giving them advice. It sucks because I can't take my own advice, but I love
Well,
helping people.
sometimes that's the way it goes. And I've got, you were like, I've prided myself. And I'm like, well, I was going to say, well, give the credit to God. But because I stop and I make sure I do that sometimes. But
Sure.
like you were saying, I mean, all the time, because it's not of me, but it's something that has been given to me
Well,
to
what's
use.
well, what scares me is I told God's Armor one time. You know God's Armor, right? Everybody knows.
Yeah,
I felt like I've been given the call,
yeah,
one time, and I described the situation to him like it was literally I was mowing in the backyard, and it was so hot out. There was not a cloud in the sky. The sun was beating down, and I can't remember what it was about, but I said like, "Can I get a cloud? Can I get some wind? Can I get something to cool me down while I was mowing?" And nothing happened. And I said, "Do you want me to change my life, the way that I'm working, the way that I see things, the way that I do things, my attitude and everything?" And nothing happened. And I said, "Do you want me to be your beacon? Do you want me to be a
your servant.
your servant? Yes. Do you want me to call upon you and preach your word and everything?" And all of a sudden, I tripped over something. I tripped over something while I was mowing, and yet I did not fall down. I was able to get back up, and to me, that kind of said yes. And even if you do, and people discredit you, and people call you names, and even if you stumble, you will not fall.
Exactly, because there will be mockers and scoffers. And the thing is, when you do make that decision, because that's why I picked the parable of the person who buried their talents. That's what I was feeling you had been through or were in, where you had a talent, but you were kind of just keeping it buried instead of going all the way with it there where you could. And maybe that was in the past, maybe that was in the recent past. I don't know. So I just felt like that applied. But when you do start to move into that, whatever your calling is, and a lot of us have different anointings, even though we can work in all of them, as the Bible says, but there's some things that are more specifically geared toward us, from the Holy Spirit. When you start using that, you're going to come up against opposition. But the thing is, if you don't, then you should be worried, am I doing the right thing? Because there should be opposition if you're doing the
Well,
Lord's work.
I'm worried that I'm not the right person to fit the job. And yes, I know that he picks the totally opposite people of what you would think are ready for that job, but I don't feel like that's me. So,
Well, I would counter with this, though, is if you didn't think that and didn't think that maybe I'm not good enough, these thoughts we've all had, why would he use me? I've asked the Lord to use me, and then these situations later on have popped up, and I realized, well, I did ask him to use me. I'd forgotten, between the time and that time, and there it was, for that opportunity, and it was just like it's it's one of those things where we all feel that way because none of us are good enough except through him. And if you didn't feel that way and you felt like, yeah, I've totally got this, then I would be worried about you, that you were overly prideful and, but you're coming at it with humility and with questioning, am I the right person? But is anybody the right person? God can work through anybody.
Right. Oh no, I definitely 100.
So, and I definitely see you going forward with that. Absolutely.
Well, I hope so. Well, okay. The next one comes is about a alcoholism. Oh, damn! It's only a page and a half long. I might have to go to my computer to write, or to I'm sorry, to read a message I wrote to my AA group because I had actually visited them one time to determine if I had a problem. But this was 5 years ago, 2014. You ready for this?
Yeah, and maybe, Cowboy, if you're still there, because I have not dealt with this particular issue. I mean, I can relate to it in other ways. I've dealt with it as well. I have, but it wasn't me, so I've dealt with it being on the other side of it. So maybe that's good enough. But I know that Cowboy can maybe relate to it too. So if you're hearing this, if you're there and you want to come back in after he's finished reading it, that would be cool. If not, I'll just take the opposite side from what I've seen, because I've seen a lot of it, and we'll go from there. Okay, are you ready?
Okay. Yep. I entitled it "I Don't Have a Problem," but with the word "don't," I wrote D-O, and then in parentheses I have, or I'm sorry, brackets I have the in apostrophe T. So it's like I'm saying, I don't have a problem, but I do have a problem.
Yeah, I do, and then the NT is the denial.
Yep,
Okay.
yep. So you get it. Okay. When does a person cross the line from enjoying a drink to abusing alcohol? Is alcoholism measured by the sheer number of drinks a person has, or what time of day that they drink, or is the presence or absence of friends, or by the number of failed relationships affected by it? But of course, the person in question will never admit they have a problem if never confronted. So why do I think I may be a candidate? I don't meet much of the aforementioned criteria, though I did make an ass of myself to my ex-wife at a party once, never laid a hand on her, and have headed into work a tad hungover in the past. But I have tempered my drinking to a point where it is almost a recognized ritual by my girlfriend. I crack between 2 and 7 beers a night after all house chores are taken care of, after I have spent quality time with the girlfriend, completed homework with my son, and read him a Bernstein Bears story, and completed any other responsibilities for the day. After this, and only after I do this, will I retire to the man cave and play my online games or watch movies. Even at 7 beers, I still don't come to bed drunk ever. I don't miss the I don't miss work over the stuff. I don't abuse the ones I loved. I stop when I don't have the money to buy it. I simply enjoy the taste and the slight head change that follows. I am funnier to my online friends and the life of the party. One of the only signs of my problem is the inevitable full trash can at the end of the week. Hell, I even cringe when I hear the trash men chuck the bag into the truck and it makes lots of clink slash crunch sounds. If I feel bad about any aspect of my drinking, then does that mean that I do have a problem? Is that the proverbial line that I have crossed? Jeez, I could have wrote so much more on this. Oh my god, hang on, let me move up.
Yeah,
Oh,
there's a lot
oh
there.
my god, hang on. No, 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 hang on. Let me move up to my computer. I've got a much better take on this from that. Oh my goodness.
Well, if you just want to, while you're looking for it, just talk a little bit. It's
No, no,
okay.
no, no. I'm gonna let you talk because I'm gonna look for it real quick. So just
Okay. Well, I mean, what I'm going to say about that little piece there is that anything, and it doesn't have to go to a point of where somebody's falling down drunk or beating somebody up or, saying things that are hurtful that they don't remember the next day. It doesn't have to get there. It can get to the point where you realize maybe that it's not moderation, or that it's helping you cope with something, or that you can't just stop and not feel like that would be difficult to just not do it anymore. It's like you're in the middle of that place of wondering, well, I could just stop this if I wanted to. Yeah, sure. But then you don't. And then when you feel that feeling, I would say that's the conviction of the Holy Spirit saying, hey, if you don't, it might turn into something a little bit bigger.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so if you're still looking, I'm just going to do a random Bible verse because I just feel like it. And I usually don't do that, but I'm going to. So let's just flip this open. Boom. Okay, so it flipped open to Jeremiah 13:13. Okay. Then shalt thou say unto them, Thus saith the Lord, Behold, I will fill all the inhabitants of this land, even the kings that sit upon David's throne, and the priests, and the prophets, and all the inhabitants of Jerusalem with drunkenness. And I will dash them one against another, even the fathers and the sons together, saith the Lord. I will not pity, nor spare, nor have mercy, but destroy them. Hear ye and give ear, be not proud, for the Lord hath spoken. Give glory to the Lord your God before he cause darkness, and before your feet stumble upon the dark mountains. And while ye look for light, he turn it into the shadow of death, and make it gross darkness. But if ye will not hear it, my soul shall weep in secret places for your pride, and mine eyes shall weep sore and run down with tears, because the Lord's flock is carried away captive. Wow, I can't believe it actually. I flipped it open to something that said drunkenness. Okay.
I can't believe that either.
That
That's
okay, well
awesome.
that's the Holy Spirit, because I just flipped it open and I'm like, really? Jeremiah 13:13? I'm starting right in the middle of something here,
I
but
Jeremiah.
okay. That
Okay.
was interesting. Okay, go ahead.
I found it. I found it.
That was kind of cool.
So
I'm like, drunkenness. Okay.
so I actually attended one AA meeting, but I attended it for all the wrong reasons. I
You
joined.
wanted people to tell you you were okay.
Yes, exactly. Yes. I wanted to find out if I had a problem, and more or less, I wanted to find out if I could deal with my level and still appreciate it and still not progress into the unknown, into the ether, into the darkness.
Like what I was saying. Yeah.
Right. So after the one program, I wrote them a letter and I included a lot of cash for their cause and all sorts of stuff. And they even let me have a copy of the Big Blue Book, which was an amazing book. It was basically like 100 stories of different people from the early 1900s all the way up through like 1970s, talking about how bad they had it and how they realized that they were alcoholics. And
It's
honestly, I
kind of
never.
like the AA's version of their, centerpiece book.
Sure,
Their,
sure.
yeah.
And what's funny was I never really reconciled with the majority of those tales. I just maybe 2% of them. But what I wrote was I sent them a letter and I said, "Wow, what a program, what a read, and what a group. There is an innate beauty in the premise set forth in Alcoholics Anonymous, what they stand for and what they aim to accomplish. God's altruistic pyramid scheme of alcoholic angels, I'd reckon. It functions by striking a chord with human nature's natural tendencies to abhor judgment and to see the wisdom and credible merit of aid given by an equal. I am forever grateful to have been given the opportunity to read that amazing book and to meet at least once in the room where the magic happens. If you work it, that is. But alas, I am further convinced that I do not belong in this room or at these meetings. I will digress, but first, please accept my meager donation, even though I will technically be an outsider, which kind of sort of violates the seventh tradition of this group being self supportive. I took a quick gander at the group's income and expensive report as it was hanging visibly on the bulletin board, and I wanted to contribute anything that may help offset the stalemate. Even if I misread it, please accept it anyways and use it to help someone who truly needs your guiding hand. And the coffee, you can hardly doubt that it will be seen as superfluous. I was actually going to buy you all a Keurig, seriously, but I didn't want to upset any traditions.
Those are good.
And I calculated that owning and using a Keurig would actually increase your expenses, but they are nice to own. Just say the word and I'll, honest to goodness, buy one for the group. I am that thankful for you guys and what you are doing.
I think they like their conversations over the traditional coffee mug thing. But was that
And,
the letter? Because can I say something as an outsider without you getting offended? I usually
yeah,
don't. I
yeah.
usually walk around offending people, but I didn't feel your heart in that. What I felt was a little bit of conviction, and then your logical mind takes over and says, oh, I noticed that you're not financially doing that great, and this institution does do good things. I just don't need it. So, I'm going to give you some money, and please don't be offended. I'm doing it humbly, and if you need this, I'll give you that because I see how many people could benefit from this. I'm just not one of them. So it was kind of almost like, here I appreciate it, but I don't need it, and I'll help you out because I see you're doing good, but that's not me. It's kind of like a conflicting. I felt like a little confliction there. Like, now, not that I don't think you can't deal with this on your own, but you have to have God's help in it.
Okay. No, point taken. Just wait for the
Like
rest.
the first couple sentences, I was like, where you were saying, oh wow, the about the book. I was like, this, I don't feel the sincerity there. And then when it came to about the figures and the numbers, I'm like, okay, there is throwing things at a different direction. And then there's, not that it's bad to offer money and help, but to say, it does good for people and it helps a lot of people, but I don't need it, but I'll
Oh,
help you,
the first
but
part
I
is
don't need it.
literally taking care of business. That's all. That's all that there is to it.
Right,
So
because I just didn't feel any heart in the first part. It was more like, thank you for having me, but
no, that's fine. That's fine. But there's more to it. There's a lot more to it. So I wrote, in my last visit, I claimed that I didn't think I had a distinct, recurring, or unmanageable problem with alcohol. I read that book cover to cover, all 575 pages, and it provided me with what I saw as my qualitative answer I was looking for. Now, I won't ever say that there isn't something there regarding my relationship with alcohol. I'd definitely be fooling myself to claim that there wasn't. But I can claim that I am not powerless over it, nor has it made my life unmanageable. To illustrate this in a backwards kind of way, please take a moment to imagine my story. My first experience with alcohol was in the eighth grade. One of my friends told me that he would bring a couple of beers from home and we could drink them during recess. We had recently found that there was a spot outside where the woods met the corner of the building and led to a path, and then an opening in the woods where it looked like the kids had made a den and hung out. We made our way there, and sure enough, he whipped them out and started on them. We were about halfway done, and we heard what sounded like a teacher coming towards us through the woods. We quickly got rid of them, but the teacher wasn't stupid, and although he couldn't find the beers, he could still smell them on our breath. We got in school suspension for it. To me, it was worth it. I still remember the buzz I got off that half a beer. I wasn't too keen on the taste, but the feeling was something new and wonderful. I was hooked. Well, I say hooked, but circumstantially, I wouldn't be reunited with alcohol for another few years, well into high school. You see, I was under the supervision of my parents, the registered nurse, and the lieutenant colonel, who just knew when I was up to no good. Yes, it did make me sneaky, but I just wouldn't and couldn't get my hands on another one until late high school. And even then, I couldn't truly enjoy it until I was on my own afterwards. My parents were to move back to my father's hometown of San Antonio to retire, while I chose to stay behind to begin community college. Did you know that professors in college couldn't care less if you showed up or not? This began a this began a career in childish things like car clubs and stereo competitions, playing guitar in a band, finding the smallest podunk town in Kansas and impressing the similarly aged partiers there with my truck stereo and my guitar and occasionally attending a college course, just enough times to remind me how poorly I was doing. And through the whole way, I had a couple of good friends, and alcohol was one of them. You see, it was my escape, my calming medicine, my social fixation, my thought collector, and my companion. We seldom left each other's side, and when I ran out, fear and dread would set in as to how I would get more. I was way beyond wanting it. My mind and my body needed it. If I would go too long without it, I would get irritable. I would say things I wouldn't normally say to people I respected. I would get headaches. When I was finally able to put one up to my lips, everything was made better. I tried to calculate how many I had on hand back at the house, back before smartphones with cameras, and if I didn't have enough, I would drive my happy ass to get some more. When I was poor, I would switch to cheaper brands. I'd even been couch fishing quite a few times for loose change. Sometimes I would think I was smart and buy in larger cases just to save money and have more on hand, but it turned out that just knowing that I had a huge supply of booze made me drink even more and I ran out quicker. I was already barely making just enough at FedEx night shift to cover my studio apartment, the gas to and from work, and bachelor food. I had gotten my checking account into a downward spiral through overdraft fees, becoming less and less replenished by my direct deposit, until eventually my check no longer brought me above the red line and into the black. Quit drinking to help save my financial situation? Hell no. It was time to start selling stuff. Poof. An $80 guitar pedal fetched $5 at the First City Pawn. Good God, they rape you there, by the way, with no KY. The guitar my girlfriend got me for my birthday brought only 20. And some other odds and ends stuff I think went towards my habit and my bills. Fast forward a few years, and my girlfriend and I moved in with her parents, got married, got tired of her overbearing parents, and then moved to Texas with my parents, where I started my career in the pool business. After a few months, we got our first apartment together. I was still drinking. That was here to stay. But somehow it had seemed to plateau. Maybe it's because of the dual income or being closer to the colonel and the RN again, but it felt like a little more manageable. The wifey grew homesick, and her parents decided to entice me back to Kansas with the promise of a big screen TV, which I never did see, by the way. I wasn't a hard sell on the free TV idea, so fast forward a few months and we were back in Kansas, now living in Lenexa, and I was working in an assistant manager's position at a busy pool store on State Line. I did great and was being offered manager positions all across the US, yet I had to keep turning them down because the wife didn't want to be away from her parents again. I obliged, but mainly because we were having too much fun with our friends from Shawnee Mission regularly, and of course, all of them drank. Life felt great, but bittersweet as it also felt, we were on autopilot. Finally, I had to tell the wife that I had to take one of these managers' positions or they'd stop offering them to me. With that, we were all packed and headed to Lawton, Oklahoma. I excelled at my newfound position there and made more money than I'd ever in the past, but home life wasn't a toilet. The wifey was miserable and we had just had a miscarriage. But any time I was sad, a beer was there to change my demeanor. Then my stupid ass had to go and get fired over some stupid shit. I demonstrated the volatility of our in house chemicals to a would be prodigy in the pool business by concocting a small fireworks show outside under controlled conditions, and my assistant manager turned me in. Turns out she was disgruntled all along for not getting the manager position and was itching for an opportunity to send me in, or anyone, packing. God help us, we ended up back at the in law's house in Kansas. I had secured a position at the local pool store within a week of being fired in Oklahoma. I'd like to think I've always tried to have a good work ethic, even though our marriage was on the rocks. With the wife's god awful parents and annoying sister on site, I think I started chain drinking, if that's a thing. But I did it anyway from their home. I spent a lot of time away from their home. When I was there, I referred to it as subjecting myself to that environment. Later on, I attribute my absence as one of the primary causes of my divorce. My wife bore a son on 7/11 at 11:07. If I'm lying, I'm dying. A year later, we moved into this tiny shack of a rental house where she ran a daycare. I couldn't really drink inside, so it was either outside or at a friend's house. Still, even though we had put some distance between her parents, that was another nail in my marriage's coffin. In a last-ditch effort to fix our marriage, we decided to buy a house together. That never really helped because now we could be in separate rooms in separate parts of the house. She bitched and nagged, and I became even more of a recluse. It was no real surprise when she took our son and moved out, back into her parents' house, and soon I was hit with divorce papers. That's when I just sat out in my garage and drank, listening to the empty silence of a big house with no one talking, no children running, no souls were in the house. My soul was surely absent as well. There were two stakes driven through my heart. One was when I came to the realization that I had mostly been responsible for the demise of our marriage. There were no additional chances from the ex. She was done done. Two was when I became privy to the fact that she was now with my best friend of 15 years, eventually getting married. Yep, that's more fuel for my addiction that seemed like it would never go away. My lawyer scored me some good time with my son on paper, so he was present through many an online relationship of mine. While filling out the dating website profile, I was asked if I drank, and I checked the box labeled no because I just knew that I could quit at any time. My track record for quitting, though, was not so rosy or promising, of course. Past attempts had included switching to light beer, only drinking socially, only drinking on weekends, only drinking when someone bought it for me, medicines, swearing it off, and throwing it out of a moving vehicle, promises made to friends and family, and promises broken. There was always that first drink. All it ever took was one damning drink, and my mind was off, making up excuses and reasons to slowly weave more and more drinking back into my life. One a day won't kill you. Oh, you should reward yourself with another one because you did this today. Oh, you can make these 20 last a whole week. At one point, my longest attempts might have been 3 days before life came crashing down and I couldn't cope with my problems again without its satisfying effects. I can remember one of my quit attempts. I was sitting with my best friend at the time in his tree stand. He was drinking a beer and he knew that I had quit. He asked me if it bothered me that he drank in front of me and I told him no. I was only like a day sober at that point, and of course it ended with me asking him if he would think any less of me if I had one of his beers. He said of course not and handed me one, the great friend that he was. After a few failed online relationships, I finally gave my problem of finding the girl of my choice to God. By that time, I had developed a unique relationship with the big guy upstairs. I was so consumed by anger for my ex best friend that it affected me in such a negative way. He controlled my thoughts, my emotions, my actions, my life. I was angry going to bed and angry first thing in the morning. I couldn't keep that up. So, all by myself, I prayed what I found to be my perfect prayer. I started by thanking God for everything in my life that I would not normally be thankful for. This would often include thanking God for my ex choosing my best friend, because who better to be around my son than someone I knew wouldn't put either of them in harm's way? I would thank God for the in laws, for without them, I wouldn't have been molded by their experiences I had, nor found the wisdom to see my errors in my marriage. Then I requested I would request something from God, but the request had to be purely altruistic or non-material. I would ask only that he take my thoughts of anger and jealousy away and replace them with thoughts of love and reverence for my Creator. And finally, I would say the Lord's Prayer. Within seconds, my mind was euphoric. The thoughts that plagued me had been swept away as quickly and as distinctly as moving into the hurricane's eye. Fierce and dark, and howling one second, warm, sunny, and clear, dry skies the next. This has proven to work flawlessly with me every single time I have stuck to those perfect prayer guidelines. And as long as I'm truly praying for something pure, it has never failed me. It wouldn't be until later that I realized God could also help me with my other problems, too. I found a gal on the dating site who was also divorced and had kids. Oddly enough, one of her requirements was that her man also be divorced and have kids. This woman, I later found out, was handpicked by God Himself and was everything I could have ever wanted and needed. Time would pass, and I'd discover more and more of her attributes that positively complemented mine. This woman was too perfect for me to screw it up with my drinking. 6 months or so into the relationship, I had been hiding it from her very well, I might add. I would chew gum, brush my teeth, use mouthwash, sometimes even change my outfit just in case she smelled alcohol on me, and she never caught on. A time came when I decided it was best for all parties for her to move in with me, and I knew I wouldn't be able to hide my drinking with her underfoot. So I did probably the smartest thing I've ever done. I told her about it. I told her just how long I'd been drinking, how I covered it up for her, the hardships I had endured that made it necessary in my mind, and most importantly, how I would stop. She was a little taken back by my admission, noting that she had almost didn't believe me because I had hidden it so well. But appreciation for honesty was not lost on her, and I stopped drinking that day, cold turkey. All I needed was enough accountability in front of all the right people, a strong desire, and prayer, a perfect prayer. I am proud to say that I've been alcohol free for almost 5 years now, and all my family couldn't be prouder. I even returned to college and brought my GPA up from a 1.6 to a 3.8, never making anything less than a 98 in any of my courses. It turns out that there were other ways to deal with my problems that weren't so destructive, other ways to relax, and I could actually have a good time without alcohol. I didn't have to drink alcohol. What a novel thought. What a great story, huh? Well, I can almost see the confused faces of the people that were present last Thursday when I came in asking for help, deciding if I was indeed an alcoholic. You all must be scratching your heads because this story sounds like it came directly from any page in that big blue AA book I just finished reading. And based on my background, I should rightfully qualify as a grateful alcoholic, right? Well, go back and reread my story. But this time, realizing that I was referring to my discovery of and my relationship with smoking, not alcohol. Seriously, go back and wherever you see the words beer or case or drinking, substitute cigarette, pack, carton, and smoking. I was reading that big book cover to cover, hunting for signs that I might have a drinking problem. And with every story and every description, I felt so alien to the concepts. I just could not relate to everyone's need for alcohol. Although I did drink and still do, hell, I was casually enjoying sips of beer while reading the AA book, which, by the way, I was sure was the key to getting the universe to fold in on itself and self destruct, the mathematical equivalent of dividing by zero. It has never left me powerless over it or made my life unmanageable. It was about three-quarters of the way through the book and it dawned on me. I hadn't smoked in years, so I had a long time to forget about smoking, but for some reason, the correlation between my experience smoking cigarettes and the people's experiences with alcohol surfaced in my brain and a light bulb had been turned on. I thought about how I actually did need it, mentally and physically, even though it was destroying me. I thought about how I would use my last bit of change to buy a pack when I could have and should have used it on gas. I thought about how it calmed me after an encounter, or the fact that I'm outright desired the effects it produced on me. I remembered all the failed attempts to quit, my feeble initial attempts to cover it up, and the excuses I would give for smelling like it, like, oh, I was around people who smoked, so the smell must have got on me. I remembered all the nifty hiding spots for my packs and buying a carton to supposedly last longer, but it just went up in smoke quicker. This was the lens through which I could finally comprehend an alcoholic's addiction. Prior to my revelation, I was reading about these people's strange tendencies and strange people's tendencies, and almost pitied them. One lady had written that anything could set her off drinking. Rug was crooked, time to drink. Other times, I would read about the pride of some of the alcoholics, and when they would feel like they were being judged, they would go on a huge bender because that will show the world how ridiculous that sounded to me. Even reading the much anticipated section, They Stopped in Time, I still couldn't relate to more than a conservative 10 to 20% of what I was reading. This section of the book was supposed to be dedicated to people who didn't quite know they were alcoholics, and by the grace of God, stopped before having any seriously negative episodes ruin their lives. And this section sounded just as crazy to me as the other two sections of alcoholic anecdotes. One lady who earned her master's degree claimed she didn't fit all of her purported tendencies that a true alcoholic embodied, like crashing cars, going into debt, or abusing a spouse. Yet here she was, telling us she blacked out regularly. One guy mentioned that he would test his ability to have only one drink on a plane, and by the end of his flight, he had hammered back drink after drink after drink. That was his aha moment. But I sit in my home theater room and drink for the taste, not for the feeling or the effects, and stop at a reasonable time to go to bed so as to prevent being hungover at work. Once I had a friend of my dad's, another colonel, rent a room from me a couple of years ago, who remarked one time when I cracked a beer at the end of a great late night conversation. I had a couple of sips, realized that we were calling it a night, and then got up, leaving the beer almost three-quarters full. He said, "You're not going to finish that beer?" I said, "Why? Just on principle?" "No, I just didn't want the rest." He then said, "Well, you're definitely not an alcoholic." Many a story included alcoholics entering AA against their will, and while there, refused to participate or listen. I willingly and openly came to you and participated and asked questions, all in an effort to gain an insight into my habit and to decide if it truly posed a problem to myself and others. When I take out my trash on trash day, the black garbage bag from downstairs always goes clink with the empty bottles, and I try to place it down gingerly so as to not make a lot of noise. I started doing this after one of my customers inadvertently showed me his, and possibly the public's, disdain for alcoholics. I was helping him with his pool and trying to turn it from green to clear in too short a time span, and he was giving me due to then he then he was giving me due to his travel plans. I asked if he had a neighbor or family member that could come by and backwash his filter while he was gone, and he told me that he had one neighbor and he didn't trust him because every time he put out his trash, his bags would clink with beer bottles. I wanted to tell him right then and there that my trash bags clinked with beer bottles, and yet here he was asking me for my advice. Yes, alcohol was there for my entire story earlier, except the eighth grade. No, I didn't officially meet up with alcohol until late in high school, and from there on out, I drank in tune with the rest of the crowd for the most part. If the crowd was getting sloshed from beer pong and throwing up, I was doing as the Romans were doing. If we were drinking socially at a barbecue and the main course was not alcohol, then I was drinking socially. Again, I would be remiss to say that there doesn't exist something unique about my experience with alcohol. My track record for drinking properly and appropriately far outnumbers the times I drank too much at the wrong times. But those times do exist, and they are the ones that make me question my habit. My highest card in my favor is the fact that I drink for the taste rather than the effect on and the need. The polar opposite of my experience with cigarettes. I don't rush the kids to bed or long for a drink while at work or hide bottles or solve all of my problems in a glass. I don't require alcohol to go out in society and feel like I can function only when liquid courage is in my system. I just relax with it after a day's work, after all my responsibilities are taken care of, and enjoy the taste. The buzz is of no consequence or requirement. I don't find myself pounding beers if I get to my time too late in an effort to catch up and get drunk quicker. I can drink one beer or 12 in the same fashion and at the same interval, all based on how much time I stay awake. My biggest damning factor would just have to be the sheer number of beers I drink on a regular basis. I probably consume 4 to 8 beers a night regularly for the past 17 years now. God, even just staring at that sentence on my computer screen makes me cringe and feel guilty. But I've always said that if Dr. Pepper tasted like beer, I'd drink Dr. Pepper all night. If only they made a non-alcoholic Leinenkugel Summer Shandy or a Virgin Corona, I'd be able to call my own bluff and put that notion to the test. But naivety is not lost on me. I wrote this letter 2 days sober into a self-challenge of 1 month, alcohol-free. I want to see if I had it in me, for one, and two, I wanted to keep myself honest, so I'm not actually kidding myself and everyone else. Thus far, it's been no sweat. I don't think I've ever been a month alcohol-free in the last 17 plus years. So this was necessary, in my opinion. I have to say, there lingers a slight feeling of sadness that I won't get to enjoy the taste each night, but the feeling is fleeting and never persists. Plus, I keep myself busy downstairs and drink water instead. I have given thought to the psychology of this month-long challenge, though. I didn't want to hide my stash, or drink it for that matter. I wanted it out there in the open, staring me in the face the whole time. I also opted not to change my routine by avoiding the downstairs and my me time. I fully embraced it. I am basically affording myself every opportunity to break my challenge. But I'm also dissecting the psychology of my choice yet a step further, too. I partly wager that my will to do this with fervor is possibly fueled by the fact that in a month I know I'll be able to drink again like a carrot right in front of me. I might look at this challenge in a different light had I not been able to drink again after a month, like if I had chosen complete sobriety. I don't know, but I do feel that a month break to test my mental resolve can't possibly be a bad thing in any light, right? I like to break down situations into variables. What can be changed or tweaked to achieve the desired results? Part of examining my drinking has uncovered the trend that the longer I am awake, the longer I drink. I don't drink faster or slower, just more due to more allotted time. I also feel proportionally worse in the mornings, sometimes, based on my time spent drinking, so I have also taken it upon myself to add an earlier 1 o'clock bedtime to my challenges. This one isn't for a month, though. This one's permanent. It just serves the function that I can be more productive with fewer hangovers in my case by limiting my exposure to alcohol. Previously, I would stay up until 2:30 or 3 o'clock, or even later sometimes. I've been doing this along with my sobriety for 3 days now at the time of writing this portion of the letter, and I gotta say, I feel so much better, and am getting so much more accomplished. It seems such a simple thing to do to produce such an exponential benefit. I also wanted to take the time to thank the ones who shared and helped last Thursday. I'm sorry this is via letter, but I truly feel I am more well written than well spoken. Buddy, who sat just to my right, I'm sorry it came down to this in your life, and I hope you're in the chair on your own accord and not because the wife's making you. I feel you are there by your own choosing, and your head is finally in the right place. I'm sorry I can't remember the next gentleman who sat to the right of Buddy, but he had the Skid Row living under a bridge story. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to meet one of the I lost everything cases. Until then, I never knew that they could come back from that far by their own merit. You did offer the in your face, I've been there, I know where this leads approach, and for that I am grateful. Lou, you came across as the attentive, non-judgmental sponsor that I would read about so many times in the book. You seem as though you would listen to a person talk, and when they would look at you to see if you were judging them, you wouldn't. You're attentive because while I was listening to each person's story intently, I would catch you watching my reactions and gauging my responses. You seem like you would make the perfect sponsor. Forgive me, I can't remember the name of the lady that sat next to Lou between Lou and Nancy. I'm pretty sure she was Carol from The Walking Dead, or at least the spitting image of her. My takeaway from that at some point in her life, she was ready to stop disappointing everyone. Her descriptions about her hiding places for alcohol were a little surreal to me at the time until I read about them in the big book. Nancy, you were so sincere. I didn't even realize that when I called, you were giving me a personal meeting with Carol from The Walking Dead, and yet you talked with me on the phone for probably 10 minutes or so while I rambled on about my issues. Not once did I feel like you were judging me or trying to hurry me up so you could get back to her. You were so inviting. Thank you, Nancy. Clyde, I believe, sat next to Nancy, and if I do have the name right, he was the gentleman that I had a brief word with outside afterwards. Clyde taught me that there were indeed situations like mine that hit close to home, and that I could fall further into full blown alcoholism. I think about your warning, and I will heed it. The younger gentleman that sat next to Clyde in the green had possibly the strongest, most extreme story, which I hope will never happen to me or anyone. He woke up to find out from a judge that he had accidentally killed his friend drunk driving while leaving himself without a scratch. You actually told me two stories that night, sir. One with your words and another with your eyes. You were pleading with me, almost angrily, to not let my habits spiral into your story, and I caught that. Danny, you taught me to be honest with myself because all it took for you to catch on to the fact that you had a drinking problem was when you were offered a glass of wine and you just knew that wasn't going to be enough. It put it in perspective for me, which the book later further exemplified. Sometimes it doesn't take a crashed car or an estranged family or a life threatening health crisis to tell us that we may not drink like other people drink. The scientific problem solving part of me wants to explore any potential similarities between alcoholics. Can this disease truly affect anyone? And if not, are the contributing factors internal or external, spurred on by nature or by nurture? Even the pseudosciences fascinate me. Are there more Virgo alcoholics due to their tendencies to recluse or not fit in? If I did stay for the meetings, maybe I could slowly assemble a rhyme and reason. Alcoholics do all seem to utilize the effects to cover up or get away from their problems. Homer Simpson once said, "Ah, alcohol, the source of and the answer to all life's problems." I don't find myself getting away through a bottle. I look to home theater building and helping my son with his homework and lawn maintenance and metal detecting as a hobby, all as getaways. That last one is a blast, by the way. If you ever want to get your mind off alcohol and onto an outdoors historical adventure, let me show you the fun in metal detecting. And if any of you would like your yard's history uncovered, let me know. I hope to God this isn't just the best written case of an alcoholic kidding oneself ever to come to an AA meeting. I really do. But I have gained a greater understanding of my drinking than before, and in only a week. I have discovered new qualifiers, stories, depths, lies, techniques, and even cheat codes. I can't believe how I've never really understood this, but I did not comprehend that a hangover can apparently be cured by drinking again. I must be the most naive goody two shoes because although I've heard about it, the book illuminated this concept in many of the people's stories, how they could just bypass the hangover by throwing back some more. It just didn't click that that was a thing. I would say that the book needs to be careful because it could actually be giving some readers pointers in a roundabout way on how to keep their habit and avoid the hangover. But I literally have got to be the dumbest alcoholic if I ever was one for not knowing that cheat. I've always just pushed through the hangover, however bad it was, and just accepted it as my penalty for my deeds. I obviously won't be practicing this cheat code as I see retaining my employment and my family as paramount. And I'll be sure to add that to my list of qualifiers that if I ever catch myself employing this technique, I'll be seeing you guys very shortly. All in all, this was a very enlightening experience. I have gleaned information and insight early enough that I could have potentially received too late. The book I was graciously allowed to borrow may have said $8.50 on the inside cover, but its information is truly invaluable. If any of you honestly feel that I am potentially making the biggest mistake of my life by parting ways with this AA, I am definitely open to hearing a case made. Hell, that's why I came in the first place. Upon request, I can and will provide my most objective list of potential reasons I could be an alcoholic, although although I have already weighed them many times while reading the big book. And if someone does find my choice to abstain from AA folly, I will gladly leave my contact information below. If not, I am forever grateful for the experience. Thank you again. P.S. I cleaned the jacket of the book. It was dirty and cruddy. I felt it deserved to be as pristine as possible, so I cleaned it and applied a light layer of conditioning mink oil. Yeah, that's me.
Yeah, the sarcasm and the well, there's your 20-page paper. And a little bit of testimony and a little bit of well, your type of humor shines through there a little bit. It's kind of like mine, a little dry and sarcastic and sometimes a little rough around the edges. But let me ask I think that somebody who is listening tonight, I think that was probably more for them than for you. But let me ask you, um, whenabouts, how long ago was this second letter?
Oh, you know what? I'm out of that room. That was probably
Just give or take.
3 years ago, something like that. 3 years.
And I'm assuming, oh, hold on. I'll be right back. For some reason, my phone shuts down even though it's plugged in.
Cowboy still there? Cowboy, you there? Cowboy. Cowboy.
Are you still there?
I'm still here. Cowboy's he's not responding. I think he fell asleep.
Well, what he said earlier was that he sent a text saying he felt that this live stream was for us, so he was gonna let us talk, and I guess he went about his business and left it open. But I was like, this always happens. Well, it's happened 3 times during this whole series of live streams the past couple weeks. Is my phone will be plugged in and charging and just shut down, and I see it charging, so it takes me 2 minutes to get back in and nothing's changed. I'm like, why did it do that? But anyway, okay, so I'm assuming then, since it's been that amount of time, that you did well with the whole 30-day thing, and it just was kind of it seemed more like a social study to you to check yourself and where you were at, and the whole thing about putting your relationship with smoking in there, because when you said about changing your shirt and washing up, that made me think of somebody that I know very well that was hiding their, trying to cover up their smoking from somebody. So I kind of caught on to that a little early. But
Oh, did you?
that, oh yeah, well, my sister, because I'm a smoker, and my sister, her husband was an ex-smoker, but he was very harsh on her about it. They're in the middle of a divorce right now, but yeah, it was a pretty big issue, and she would feel like she had to like come over to our house in the beginning and brush her teeth and change her clothes and then go back so she wouldn't get yelled at, and the whole thing, just trying to hide it or do this or that. And then it got to the point where she was like, well, you knew this when you married me. And I've run into people that have quit, and with me, I've never felt convicted on it because I'll be with someone who's like hurrying to have a cigarette, and for me, I'll go outside and just enjoy sitting there with my cigarette. I don't have to have it. I don't have to like have 20 in a row. I don't have to hurry up. It's just I'm taking my time, enjoying what I'm doing. I smoke menthols, and I don't feel convicted of it. I don't feel like I have to do it. But I've seen other situations where people are like, I'm like, what's the point if you're just like 1, 2, 3, okay, let's go in, like hurry up. And I'm like, why would I? I'm like, that's not why I'm doing it. I'm doing it because I'm sitting outside. It's a nice night. I'll have a cigarette or I don't. But there's some people that it's more of a routine and a habit and a gotta do it. And I've seen that too. So I
Yeah.
caught on to that. Yeah, I was like, I think, yeah, I'm seeing where the switch around is here. But yeah. So,
Awesome, because nobody's ever caught on to that except
well,
me.
as soon as you started talking about, because, with alcohol, but as soon as you said about changing clothes, I'm like, that's cigarette smoke. That's not alcohol unless you spilled it all over yourself.
Sure, sure. No,
But you have to
that's
know people
great.
who've tried to,
Yeah,
they know I'm doing it, but I'll change my sweater so they're not upset. I'll take a shower here. And went through that. So I'm like, yep.
yeah. That's what I was trying to illustrate is the difference between needing it and just wanting it, because it's evolved a little bit but not much since then, and it's literally based on time. Like literally, if I start drinking at the normal time after the family's in bed and the wife's happy and the house chores are done, if I stop at about 1 o'clock, I'm usually straight because I don't drink anymore. I don't drink to catch up. I don't drink to get to a certain head change. I don't drink to get fucking
And it
stupid
didn't
drunk.
sound like you were really into the liquor, but I could
I
be
have
wrong.
I have a huge collection of liquor, but that's a different story. That's I have over 100 bottles of whiskey, but they're all they've all got liquor inside, and they're not empty. And it's only because I have.
Yeah, I actually have. I'm not a drinker really. Every now and then, some wine or champagne or occasions. But I know what you're saying because they came out with like Crown Peach. So I have a full one or an apple just for if people come by. It's more like a show. It's on a show stand. I don't really get in it. So
Well, I can counter any assumptions about my issue with liquor because about 2 years ago I
No,
happened
you were
upon.
just talking more about beer, so I was just saying it doesn't seem
Sure,
like it
sure,
was.
sure. No,
Yeah.
about 2 years ago, I happened on a YouTube channel called the Whiskey Vault, and they basically you had to watch them because their thumbnails were just basically this wall of different whiskey bottles, and so that naturally drew everyone to watching that if you had any inclination to watch anything about whiskey in the beginning. And they grew and grew and grew into a huge YouTube channel, and it's nothing but reviewing whiskey with a great dynamic duo. There's two people that do it, and they're great people, and they've even evolved from there. But they've created a great following on Facebook and on YouTube, and it's all about people that want to explore whiskey without abusing it, and all the different tastes and the experiences with it. And I even have get togethers about 3 or 4 times a year with my closest friends, and I teach them about whiskey and about how to order stuff at a bar so that they're not just guessing at something. They'll get the experience of drinking it with me so that they know if they like it or not. I'll teach them about the different ways to drink it on the rocks or neat in a Glencairn glass, and it's all
Yeah, I used to
it's
have that problem of not knowing what to order, but I knew that I liked Crown whiskey because
sure.
that's how my dad was. And my dad, he knew how to make his own stuff. There's one thing of whiskey that I know he made, and he used to make beer and stuff when I was younger, but it's more like, I mean, nothing was ever abused. It's just one of those things. So, yeah, I mean, asking people like, what would this go good with, or that or that. But no, so I really wasn't picking up on that as an issue, or really much of it as an issue, because I would put the question to you. Let's say you were down having a beer in your den, or your cave, or your whatever you want to call it, your man cave, your man area, and your wife came down to hang out. That would just be normal, right? That'd be cool.
Sure.
Yeah. See, I mean, I just I think I mean,
Yeah,
that read more like a psychological study to me. You even all the people you talked to, what their advice was, their stories, just trying to make sure that you didn't fall into that other area. But yeah.
it was a great eye-opening experience, and
But to be able to connect that to cigarettes, not only to cigarettes, but to anything that could be addictive, and bring that to whoever's reading its attention or is listening to it, is the overall, I would say that's a pretty good thing to do. And what I would say to people is, if you feel convicted about it, you know, really convicted about it, like guilty, and when you really know there's a problem, then that's time to
okay.
ask the Lord and be directed.
Hey,
But
Jerry, I feel like we're being called to help a little bit. Troy Warren posted a
okay,
question in the chat. He says, I have
I
a
can't
question.
see it, so thank you.
Troy Warren posted a question, says, I have a question for the panel. Y'all brought up AA. Do y'all have any thoughts or insights for people who do struggle with destructive behavior that they can't stop? First and foremost, I got to ask Troy, is it alcohol related? Because you kind of said it, but you didn't explicitly say it. You said you have a question for the panel since you brought up AA, but then you talk about destructive behavior that they can't stop. Is it alcohol related? Are you noticing yourself performing these destructive behaviors after you've been drinking or not? Is this related or not related to alcohol?
Did he Was he there when you were reading your letter?
I don't see any of his comments prior to that, but let's see. If you read the 12 steps and replace alcohol with the word control, it means a great deal. He does say AA is a great place to learn about people. I was forced to go for 2 years. The real learning happens when you recognize the patterns of different people over time. So I guess, yeah, I guess he was there for my
Oh,
reading.
okay. So he knows that we've been covering a couple different topics, and that was the last one. So,
So I'm going to
did he
assume
give
he's
you?
talking. Yeah, so I'm going to assume he's talking about destructive behavior when on AA. I guess a pertinent question would be: is that self-destructive, or are you ruining relationships with people around you? And both
You
are.
mean during the process of going through the rehabilitation process? Because if you're in AA, not drinking versus drinking is a distinction.
Well, he noticed the benefits of an AA meeting, so to me that tells me that he has seen what AA can do, but I'm not sure he values that over the fun or the allure of drinking. I'm not sure it's weighed
Okay,
on
so we
him.
have somebody that is recognizing that theirs is an actual problem with this.
He says just deeper conversation that isn't necessarily anecdotal. Okay. All right. Well, I won't
See,
make.
I told you there was a reason that you read all that. It was someone for someone here.
Yeah. Um. I've always I've clinged to something with my drinking that I've said in that piece, and that's I don't need it. I like it. If I said if Dr. Pepper tasted like Bud Light or Kugels or whatever, I'd be drinking Dr. Pepper regularly every night. Um, I like the head change a little bit, but it's inconsequential. I don't need it to function in life. I don't need it to wake up in the morning. I don't need it to deal with society. I don't need it to go to work. So there's a big difference between needing it and wanting it, or liking it. You know, needing it and liking it. I guess wanting it is still
Yes.
pretty extreme because I don't want it. I mean, when I'm at work, I don't sit there and go, "All right, it's almost 6 o'clock. It's time to go home." And when I go home, it's three more hours before I can have a drink. It's not like that. It's literally I get all my functions done, my household chores, I get everything done, my responsibilities, and then I can sit back in the garage with my cigar and my whiskey and my beer.
Well, I
So,
think what we have to remember though is if just because you don't necessarily have that problem to an extent where you could be having more issues like drinking causing outbursts or saying things you don't remember that you said or arguments or that sort of thing. And I don't have that kind of experience. We can still come at it as, you know, from even a spiritual or a stressful, what triggers that? Does the person feel like they need it? Um, like you said. Um,
well, I guess since he's talking about deeper conversation, not necessarily anecdotal, I do want to touch on whether or not this person may be proud of their actions under alcohol, or do they despise themselves after they've been drinking? Like, do you wake up later and go, man, I shouldn't have done that for any reason? Is it damn I'm hungover and this is a regular thing, or is it damn I can't function, or is it damn I said the wrong thing to the wrong person? If you're waking up with regrets, if you're thinking of alcohol and every time you lament alcohol with regret, then that's an issue. If you're
yeah,
literally,
that's what I would say. And not and it's a good thing to distinguish that from being a little hungover because sometimes you'll feel like crap about everything even if you didn't do anything wrong. But to actually feel like, oh, I said things I don't remember, I offended people, I acted out, I maybe, threw something or, whatever it may be.
hmm yeah, I've studied alcohol for many many years of imbibing and teetering on whether or not I have a problem. And I just read that whole thing on whether or not I think I have a problem. And I don't think I have a imbued problem. There are some red flags and some factors there that I'm not too kosher with, but I don't think I need it. And that was the big takeaway from the AA Big Blue Book, was every case that I read in that blue book was talking about people that needed it. Like,
Like
they
they would
woke up.
sacrifice their food money for, you know,
Yeah. If any,
alcohol.
if
Yeah.
anybody if anybody's a smoker too, that's the best way I can relate it. Is you need
Yeah,
those
because
smokes.
I picked up on that when you were talking about like the money disparity and that sort of thing. I was like, well, you would know if, let's say, it was this life sustaining thing versus a carton of cigarettes. You know what I mean?
Right, right.
That
And
should open your eyes.
and even on the lesser side too, I quoted one lady that I dealt with at the meeting where she said she had flown on a plane and they offered one drink to her, and she literally in her mind thought that's not going to be enough. And I can kind of understand where she's coming from. It's like one drink is not going to be enough. And I'm doing air quotes right here. If you need to get to a certain point anytime you drink, if you need, that's the big word, is you need to get to a certain point anytime you drink, then
Yeah, and
that
that point's going to get higher and higher and take more and more because of our natural tolerance for things.
sure. Yeah, if you just can't drink it because you like the taste of it regardless of the mind effects on it or from it, then that can be an issue. That can be a signifying factor.
Yeah, and it I always like to bring it back to the spiritual aspect of it too, because there's things that, it could be a lot of things. It could be holding in emotions that sometimes when you're drinking they come out very violently or aggressively because you're not dealing with them openly in the regular time. It could be a lot of frustrations or issues that you're not working on, and then you feel bad about yourself, so you're like, well, this will make me feel less bad about it right now, but really there's more going on than just the drinking. There always is.
Yeah, the same importance of
It's
needing
almost
to.
like the drinking is a symptom of a bigger problem and not always the problem in and of itself, even though it
Well,
makes it worse.
well, what I was getting at is I said need is the biggest red flag, but you could also substitute the word using. Are you using it for something? Are you using it to cope with society? Are you using it to cope with your job? Are you using
Right,
it
or
so
even
that
pain like a medicine. Yeah.
pain? Exactly. So, do you need it because you're using it? It's really a self introspection introspective road that you have to go on. Are you using it? Like, you got to be honest with yourself. That's the biggest thing. And if you feel like you can sit back and look at it and say, yeah, I probably am using it, but you can't do anything about it, then holy shit, you do have a problem.
And I just would like to say, because you did a pretty good analysis there of AA, even though you yourself did not end up needing to go there, for somebody who would find out that they did have a problem, would you suggest that that is one of the better steps to take? What's your opinion on it in that situation?
Well, AA does perform a specific function, and I learned that from going to at least one meeting and reading the book. It is a close knit family of people who have some horror stories or just stories of their own. Everything ranging from I've had too many and we can't support our bills to holy shit, I've killed a best friend because of my drinking problem. It's a close
Right.
knit group. It's a family. It literally is a family of people that can help you relate to your situation, and they will all be there for you. If you even question it, like I did, go to one of those. They'll help you realize whether or not you have a problem, and they'll be there for you. Like none other. Actual people who have been there through those situations, and most of the time worse, to be there for you.
Yeah,
So
and what you were saying about the sponsor was really important, because you could make a good friend at AA, but they could be new in, and you could be new in, and then you could become drinking buddies if you don't have that separation of what you're there for, and go to a sponsor instead of another struggling person with the issue.
right. Yeah, I went to there for all the wrong reasons. I went there to figure out if one I had a problem and two how I could manage my current drinking status.
Yeah,
And
and it all also looked like you were doing some breakdown on um, the whole system.
sure, sure,
And that might just be how your mind works, but you did.
that I did. And I could be kidding myself. I hope I'm not. I hope this doesn't devolve into something because, like I said, I've got red flags. And it's
Right. And there
my
are
biggest
some
red
people
flag
that
is
do.
literally the time that I'm spent drinking. I could drink the same rate if I started at 12 o'clock in the afternoon or if I started at 9 o'clock at night. I could drink the same rate. And I may be able to sometimes stop it and say, hey, I need to drink water and I need to have some Aleve before I go to bed. But sometimes I don't. And the times that I don't, that's where I'm like, damn, I might have an issue. So I have some red flags, but I'm
Yeah, I
definitely.
mean, I've seen people with kind of your situation where they'll work all day or 6 day weeks, and sometimes when they come home they'll have a couple beers before bed, and it's never really an issue. And then sometimes they'll go on vacation, they'll have a little bit more, but it doesn't really devolve into they can't do their job every day, or if they have to get up at 3:30 in the morning to be there at 5, they can't do that, or things like that. So it's not atypical in a week for someone to have a couple beers a night sometimes, if they aren't prone to already having an issue with it, which usually stems at a younger age or maybe even in the early 20s. Or sometimes there's even could be a genetic factor behind it.
Yeah, that's true too, because you can have some influences in your family tree. It scares me a little bit because my dad had an issue with it early on in his college years, but he seems to have come off of that and become a much better person. I don't think my grandpa had it, but it's
Yeah, I
there's
usually try to tell people not to focus too much on, family and genetic stuff, because then they'll start to worry about situations that haven't even happened yet, and you don't always have to fall into that line. Actually, spiritually, you can cut off from that.
Mhm. Did you like the part in my reading where I talked about formulating the perfect prayer and dealing with the ex best friend who is my ex wife's husband now,
Yeah, I
dealing with
actually
the.
I actually did. I did, because it reminded me of a situation that I know. Okay, so my mom got married right out of high school. She was engaged her senior year. It was a little small town. And the relationship, he was an alcoholic, and he did, have some abusive times, and then he ended up cheating. And his best friend, a couple years younger than him, was one of the ones who, had a friend that was dating one of my mom's friends. So anyway, they took her out and showed her what was going on. And my sister is from that first marriage of my mom. And what happened was, when she left, and then they were going through the divorce, and then after, when he would have some visiting rights, which eventually he just stopped and he wouldn't travel. But so my dad used to be his best friend. And, 7.5 years later, or 5.5 years later, my sister was the flower girl at my parents' wedding. And so I know nothing about really all of this. And by the time I'm 4.5, we're moved down south because of my dad's job. And then my parents were separated for a while, for a few years. They actually got divorced and remarried. But when I was in my early 20s, my grandfather got sick, my mom's dad. And we went up there and we had nowhere to stay. And that used to be my mom's house. She just let him have it when she left. And we stayed there in the extra rooms. And I was sitting outside, and I was smoking on a swing. I remember it was cold. And my sister's dad, who she hadn't talked to in a long time and hadn't seen, he came and he sat down next to me and he started talking. And he said, "We have so much in common, and, we're not related." And just like me and his son from another marriage, it was really strange because I had more in common with him than with my sister. But, but we were just talking, and he's like, "I just want you to know that I've forgiven your dad. I have nothing against you." And all of this stuff came out of him, and it was just like he needed someone to say it to. And my dad, they just never got the opportunity. And my dad just thinks, oh, he never bother to travel down here. It is like an 8.5 hour drive to see my sister, and then he only came once after she had her first son. And so my dad pretty much raised her the whole time, and the whole thing. But it was like he was talking to me because he knew they would never be in a place to talk to each other like that. Because my dad still held some anger, and I don't know, both of them. But it's like he was telling me, I forgive him. I did bad stuff. It was mostly my fault. I have nothing against you. The whole thing. And I'm sitting here listening to this man, and I'm like, he's pouring his heart out to me, and I had no idea about any of this at the time. So that was interesting, but yeah, it reminded me of that because, and then I was like, well, at some point, I hope that my dad gets there too.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I don't know everything that went on, but I do know some stuff. But people do grow up, and sometimes when you get married right out of high school, and you know, I just, I sat and I talked to him, and it was just really interesting. It was kind of like I was the fill-in for my dad at that point in time, because he's like, he's raised you to be, this and this and that and the other, and he's done a really good job. And then he started thinking about my sister, and he was just, everything he should have said to him, he said to me, and then I felt like he cleared that out. So yeah, it was an interesting moment because I was kind of the stand-in. And I never told my dad about it. It's not really, there was never a chance, or a good opportunity to be like, hey, while you guys were divorced, we stayed there, but we didn't really stay there. We just didn't have anywhere else to go, to be nearby. And then he passed away a week later. So yeah, it
Okay.
was pretty interesting. But forgiveness, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm actually kind of back in that dark place. Just gotta be honest with you. I had experienced an issue with the ex-wife probably about a month ago where she didn't bring the boy back in on time because of certain situation. And I got mad about it. And since then, I haven't talked to her. I haven't really like expressed anything. I've just been kind of really quiet, and I don't look at her when we meet. I don't talk to her unless it's required. And I'm wondering how long I can keep this up, because I'm definitely angry about it, and rightfully so. But I feel like I could, as the person I am, I could actually drag this along until my son is 18 and decides to live where he wants to live, which is only another 5 years, 6 years, something like that.
Well, isn't
But
it as a teenager, if the child, if it's like half time, they can actually choose where they'd rather be? Because I'm kind of that's about to happen with my
well,
nephew, I think.
she is the primary caregiver according to the court system. I got some good time.
Okay.
She has the what do you call it? The starts with the J. She's got jurisdiction, or the primary primary custody.
Sh Yeah, I know yeah, primary custody. That means she's I know the word, but it's not coming to me. But yeah, that's different because with my sister and her soon-to-be ex-husband, they're doing like half the week, or this week, that week. So it's like half time. That way he doesn't have to pay child support, and he has a townhouse close to where the school he's going to is. But it's getting to the point where he's angry about the situation. And there was one time where my nephew at 12 years old had to say, hey, Dad, I know you don't want me here. So if you're just going to be angry at me, will you just take me home? Because, and that's the sort of thing where I'm like, they need to work this out because he doesn't need to be caught in the middle of it.
Yeah,
Because I'm like, if the kid
the
feels like he
sweetheart.
doesn't want him there, you know,
Yeah, it'll probably eventually pass, but I might just need some reassurance that it will. Sorry, I got some chips in my mouth. But
yeah, it's a little different of a story when it comes to like my sister's dad, because you know how teenagers are. she had friends down here. She didn't want to make the 9-hour trip when she could stay by herself. And he never once, in all those many, many years, made the effort to drive down here to see her. So he basically forfeited all his parental rights, never called, never really made the effort. So that's kind of a different situation. So that's why my dad was mad about it, because he was never there, which made her feel, however she felt, and he basically did raise her, so it's kind of a hard thing. But
Yeah.
he did come down when she had her first kid, because at that point, his son, who's a few years younger than me, was old enough to do the drive for him, or split the drive. And then when he was down here, my mom would go over there, and they would go to the store to get stuff for the baby and everything. But my dad wouldn't be around him, and just even at the funeral, you know, after we had stayed there and we went back up and my dad was there, he came just to pay his respects and show that he was there, and he talked to my mom for a minute, and then my dad saw and he came out and I guess scared him away. But I'm like, these things, when you're friends or you were friends, I mean, they can leave some issues where I'm like, you guys need to like talk alone for like 10 minutes, and after all these years maybe you can get past it. Because I know that the one person is apologetic and repentful and wants forgiveness, and then the other person doesn't even know that, but I'm not the one that should be telling him.
Sure. Where is Cowboy? What the hell? This is his stream.
Well, yeah, that's the thing, is he put a message up saying, I think, or he was feeling in the spirit that this stream was for us to do. And then by this point, I think he probably went about his business and was listening in. And I'm going to say at this point, he's probably asleep, because that's, I know how he is. Especially if he was listening in. He says my voice kind of calms him to sleep, and it's happened a few times. Because I did ask him, before my phone was dying, all that stuff. I was like, you can relate to some of this. So when he's done, come back in with your opinions. But since it is a weekday, let's see. I'm East Coast, so he's earlier than me. But let's see. It would be, I don't know. Maybe he is asleep.
Okay. Well, Troy Warren, did we talk about your requested topic? Did we dive into that deep enough for you? Is there anything else you want to talk about?
I think that he's struggling with that kind of a situation, and all you can really do is encourage people, if they have been to AA and they know that maybe they didn't really like it or want to accept things at that time. You can always give it another shot. That's what I've got on that. But we've covered quite a few things just by going through multiple topics, and managed to bring it back to faith. And hopefully, I feel like this situation you're going through, that'll be resolved. It's just, you never want to hold on to unforgiveness, because really it just ends up turning in on you. It's
I
like
could
it's
do it
like
for
that old saying, when you point the finger, you've got three fingers pointing in at yourself and one crooked finger pointing outward.
yeah. Well, I could do it for years. I mean, this bitch is married to my ex best friend of 15 years. I knew him longer than I knew her. So I've got every right to hate them. And I
Yeah,
did get
but
over it
like you said,
one
is
time.
he being a good, supportive
I think so.
husband?
I think so.
And
But
if you were still in the relationship and things had kept going the way they were, do you think things are probably better off for her now? And You did say that you felt your son was safe with him, so
Yeah, but I can't discount the fact that anger and angry emotions will arise again, and that's where I'm at now. I'm just kind of pissed off again.
yeah, it's like I don't know. It takes it. It's not. It's easy to say, to forgive someone, even especially when really bad things have happened. And I've been in that situation, and I can say I've honestly forgiven, everybody involved in the situation. I've forgiven that person I thought I never could, but I'm not going to tell you it happened overnight. It was, it took decades of time. And a lot of trust in the Lord and knowing that, you know, he did what he did for that person too. He would have done it just for that one person. So who am I to judge,
Yeah.
I guess that's kind of how I think of it now, but
As cliche as it sounds, it took me one of my other best friends to help me. He basically told me that people will do what people are going to do. As cliche as it sounds, people have their own agenda, and he said you just can't stop that. So it was basically inevitable in his book that that was going to happen in my world. So people are going to
well,
do what people are going to do.
well, that's kind of like saying though that everyone's going to follow through with their worst instinct, or saying that it was the worst outcome when it maybe might not have been from the outside or larger point of view if you
Well, it
take
helped
your
me.
own emotions out of it.
It really did help me at the time because I was struggling with why is my best friend dating
Right,
my
right.
ex-wife.
That's not what I'm not trying to throw that out the window. I'm trying to actually say that I'm trying to actually make it a little bigger that people, you know, the way things work out are usually the way it's intended. And sometimes we get hurt in the process, or we don't understand the bigger picture of why this is the best thing. But even just hearing the whole story, I think maybe at that point in time and where you were at that point in time, she really probably needed somebody, and you know, maybe it was the the thing that, especially if they're still together and all is good.
Hey,
But
you know what? You know what? I understand your advice, and I believe it. I don't like it though.
well, you don't have to, and you don't always have to agree with me. I'm not always right anyway, but it's just, and nobody is,
You're
and
right though.
that.
No, you are right. And there was a time just a month and a half ago that I still believed in it, and I'm just in that funk again where it's like, damn, my ex-wife is married to my ex-best friend. You know,
Well, that's gonna happen. Things will come up into your mind, and it'll be like, if this still bothers you, that sort of test of things. And for a while, it will, and it could take. It's gonna take however much time it's gonna take to heal from that and get to the point of, you may have already forgiven them, but sometimes there's even, it's ourselves. Sometimes we're not forgiving ourselves. Sometimes it's easier to forgive other people than ourselves sometimes. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah, yeah. But do you know any contract killers?
Not that I'm aware of.
Damn it!
Ah, I'm getting your sense of humor. That's funny. Oh man. But no, what I was taking point with was saying people are going to do what they're going to do. Now, I believe what they're meant to do, but like as far as, like the way the satanic people take it, or the negative people take it, is just do whatever you will. That I don't agree with. I'm like, you got to, keep things in a check. But some things, when you look back on it, like from a long ways back, you know, then you'll be, or maybe you won't get it until everything's all said and done, and then you'll see the whole big picture and perspective, and you'll be like, oh, you know what? I never knew that, or from this point of view and that point of view, and oh, I never even saw that because I only saw my own.
Oh yeah, I mean that was the whole basis for my perfect prayer. I literally had to expand my horizons and think of the silver lining for every cloud. And with regards to my best friend dating her, I literally understood that, hey, I didn't have to vet this person. I didn't have to wonder if he was going to treat her right and treat my son right because I knew him. And that was the biggest factor in my decision to accept what the world was giving me because I knew that it would all work out.
Right, and something you said in there, I can't remember, it wasn't about that, it was about something else, but it was the perfect definition of repentance, which isn't just saying, hey, I'm sorry, it's having a total change of mind about something and seeing it from a totally different perspective than you once did, you know? And it wasn't that part of your story. I don't remember when it was, but I was like, that is a really good that is what it is, you know?
Yeah, I think
But
what you're talking about.
yeah, you probably do since you have it on the, you know, people typically remember, at least I do. Even if it's a long time ago, I can pretty much sum up and remember big papers or things that I wrote that, you know, were from well, they were all from the heart. I put a lot of myself into everything that I wrote, and then I started to realize that, you know, I should start not just keeping a journal, but, you know, start writing. So I've been working on a book, but you know how life is. There was a couple year gap there, but I think I'm ready to start getting back into finishing that first one up. But
Well, look at
yeah, lately I've been doing a
current.
lot more talking, and it's a positive thing because I said, Lord, you know, just use me and put me where you want me to be. And I didn't know how this whole stream was gonna. And then Cowboy said he was gonna disappear, and I'm like, well, you know, we're touching on some pretty important things, and as long as we take it back to what's most important, we're all good.
Sure, I think we can end on Troy Warren's quote here in the chat. He,
Okay.
he says, most people either don't know or even worse, don't care how their decisions and actions affect other people. The worst burdens to carry are the burdens from choices that weren't yours.
Hmm. That is deep.
That's profound.
It is, and the thing is, you don't always have to. I mean, those decisions that are made, and those things that are done are done. But with forgiveness and with forgiving yourself and moving forward, you don't have to keep carrying that burden. I know this is going to sound cliche, but you can just give it over to the Lord. You really can, and then try to move
And I did,
forward.
Troy, I did too, brother. It worked for me, and it's worked for me for the most part up until about a month ago, where I honestly feel that Satan is driving my hatred at the moment.
Yeah,
And
that's
I'm
what I
gonna
was
do it.
saying. These things will be brought back, and sometimes it's a test. It's like, okay, you know, the enemy can only do as much as the Lord lets him do. So maybe it was like, okay, well, go ahead and see if how much of a issue that still is for him. You know, just a little thing, and then you'll overcome it and be even better than you were before on the other side. I have no doubt. But
Mm-hmm.
sometimes you have to let yourself have those emotions and go through that and then come out the other side. But the whole time you're going through that fire, you know that the Lord's with you. So, and it's the
Right.
truth because I've been through a lot of stuff that I could say, man, that is really messed up. And I could have turned into a really bitter, internal, just nasty person, but I didn't. I mean, by the grace of God, that's not what happened. So,
That's where I feel I'm going, and I don't like it, but I do like it, if that makes any sense. Because when things are quiet among us in real life, it's like I'm expressing to her how pissed off I am with her about her actions, and
right, but also you don't want to hurt anyone else, or you don't want to bring things back to a place that's already been overcome. And I know sometimes things feel a little boring, and when something happens and you can express more of that, it's like a little shake up test. But when you actually are so far past it, you know what I mean? It's just one of those things that you have to keep working on.
Sure. Yeah, I'll probably keep working on it. I'm just
You'll probably,
mostly.
I bet you in time, you're gonna laugh at that, and it's gonna be good.
Yeah, I'm definitely being controlled, I feel, by a dark force because at the moment I'm happy being pissed off about it. And I know that's not right. I really do know that it's not right.
Yeah,
But
there's the lightest, because people usually go right to like possession, but before that, there's like oppression, and then there's like suppression, which is the lightest thing. Just like thoughts that aren't yours coming into your head, but if you accept them and you go with them, then they lead you to a place internally where you're like, I know this isn't right, but you kind of or take it in, and sometimes you could just renounce and reject that and just say, Lord, I really can't handle what's going on, and I need. It's kind of like when Peter fell in the water when he was walking toward Jesus, and he lifted up his hand and he said, Lord, help, and he just pulled him up, and he's like, his faith wavered, so he started to fall down, but as soon as he reached up his hand, he pulled him back up. And I see that happening a lot as people all through the community of people I'm talking to, whether it's in the faith community, the truth community, I mean, they all overlap. And that's why he's been calling all these like overlapping, this and that. But that people have been going through like tests of things from the past, and I feel like sometimes it might be like the final little hurdle to get over of things inside of yourself that need cleaned out, and just be like, you know what, Lord, if there's something there that needs cleaned out, go ahead and do it, because if I really went all the way down this road, it would be a really bad place to be, and I might not be able to come back from that. You know what I mean?
oh yeah, oh yeah, I do.
Because I'm seeing how your mind works, and I'm like, okay, that might be a better analogy.
Oh, you've seen how my mind works.
Well, I don't know how to explain how my mind works. And that's funny because I used to get this all the time when I was younger and even now, but now it just makes me laugh and smile. But I never understood it when I was younger because friends of mine, or, I thought they were friends of mine, or guys that I worked with, or whatever, people would always say to me, I thought because of the way you looked, or what you would talk about, or this and that you were this way, but now I don't understand because you're talking about this, and I can't put you in a box. And he's like, everybody I know, I can put them in a box, and I can't do that with you. And about the fifth or sixth time I heard that from somebody, I was like, you know what? I'm really glad that people keep saying they can't put me in a box, because I don't want to be one of those people that you can just be like, oh, she goes over here. Because
Well,
then you
I will
think
admit
that,
that.
and then it surprises you.
Well, no, no, no. I will admit that that's something that I relish in. I try to immediately put people in a box so that I can
Yeah, and
predict
it could
action.
seem one way, and then all of a sudden I'll flip the other way, and they're like, I have no idea where to put you because I didn't know this and that, and you make no sense. And I'm like, good.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we kind of want people to ascribe to a certain morality and stick with it. You know, if you're going to
Well,
profess,
no, that's not what I'm talking about. Is faith wise. It's just like first judgments that you have about people, like just based on the way they look, or the type of clothes they wear, or the music they listen to, or whatever you know about them. And then you find out more about them, and they're like, wait a minute, you don't believe in sex outside of marriage now, this, that, the other. It's like, I just wouldn't have figured all these things. And then, oh, you listen to music from the 40s or 50s or whatever it was that was like totally different from what their idea, from even knowing me just for working with me for a couple years, was like totally out of whack with who I was. And it always was that way, is that whatever I was being judged as wasn't what I truly am. And I'm like, I tell people, in person, on the phone, on these live streams, I'm just me, and that's all I can be. But it always was kind of like people would try to group people into categories, I guess, of that fit together, and I never really fit in any one
Right.
category.
Well,
I could move around.
it's different finding out that someone is deeper than they appear to be versus finding out that someone is unable to be placed in a box. They're unable to pinpoint where their morals lie, where their
Yeah, I'm
priorities
not
lie.
talking about faith or morals. I'm talking about the initial judgments we
Okay.
just make on people.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, that's fine. It's just if you mess with people, it's probably because you change your outward appearance. It's not necessarily finding out what lies
Or that they
deeper.
judge by the outward appearance, and then when they get to know you more, they realize they
It's no,
were
it's tough.
wrong because
It's
they
tough to
just judge
describe.
by looks.
No, it's tough to describe because I can fully accept someone that is deeper than they appear, but I can't accept someone that is fickle. And I'm not
Right.
saying you're fickle,
I
but
think what it was, because this was a guy who was interested in me, and I was, and the other people too, the same types of situation, really only knew me by how I looked and how I acted at work, and then they realized I was deeper than that, and as far as my morals and that sort of thing, it threw them off. So they were judging a book by the cover, is
okay,
basically what was happening.
okay, I got you. Well, I'm gonna have to hit the hay because I'm way past my self-imposed bedtime that I clearly won't
Yeah,
be
I
work.
think that this went pretty well with that I didn't realize how long that letter was, but I think that that was meant for the chat, and a lot of the stuff we talked about, we went pretty deep with some of these things. We could have gone a lot deeper, but then we would have been on probably till early in the morning, so we can't do that, but hopefully we can pick up again another time.
Yeah, for real. Sounds good.
It was
I, I,
nice
I
to talk
definitely
to you
appreciate
and get to
chatting
meet
with
you.
you.
And
I don't think I've had the pleasure of talking with you yet, Sherry.
I think maybe a couple times, but the panel was just so packed that we didn't really get to talk. And then somebody dropped out, or I dropped out, or you did,
Right.
or.
And I do much better one on one. Like I can't stand when there's like 6, 7, 8 people in the chat and you can't even tell who's talking.
Yeah, I told Cowboy if it's like four, maximum five people, including the host, but once it gets to be eight people talking, I'm like, I can't do that. I just can't.
Right. Oh, exactly. It's so much chaos to try to root through, and I can't do chaos. I spend my time making order out of chaos, and that's just too much.
Well, yeah, it's just, and then you think everybody's on the same kind of page about what we're talking about, and then someone will randomly throw something just up in the air and someone else does, and I'm like, okay, I don't think this one is for me. I can't really add anything to this, so I
Well,
would
for
just
me,
remove myself.
yeah, for me, it's not only that, it's like the panel is going along with one direction, and then all of a sudden everybody's changing it for to other directions. It's like you started out talking about bears, and then it ends up with psychology, life as we know it, and it's just it changes from one thing to another to another to another to another, and you just can't get it back on track. And Cowboy, bless his heart, he keeps trying to get it back on track, but I literally sent him a
Yeah, there
link.
was one that he took down, and I was like, yeah, that's the one that I had to leave because I felt the Holy Spirit wasn't in it for me anyway. So I left, and he's like, yeah, I ended up taking that one down. And then there was one I listened to like the first hour and 45, and I was like, that's why I felt like I didn't belong in that one because I didn't. And yeah, you're absolutely right. He does his best, and sometimes things go off the rails, or people come in just thinking about one topic, and he's like, "No, this isn't about the Mandela effect." He's like, "Think of any other any other topic." And I was like, "Oh, bless his heart." But there's too many people trying all at one time to be heard, but they're not trying to have an actual discussion,
Right.
which is what I'm better at, is like one-on-one discussion.
Yep. Amen. You and me too, sister.
All right. Well, thank you all for listening, and everyone who's been in the chat. And Cowboy's probably sleeping, so sweet dreams. And thank you for reading your papers and giving that letter. I really think the chat needed to hear that, and for answering my questions and putting up with my digging into all of that with you.
It was tough.
And
It was tough.
and I had a nice time, and hopefully we'll get to do it again. So you guys look forward to that, and we will say good night. Do you have anything
All
you want
right.
to say?
Nope, nope. Glad to have potentially helped some people, and I'm glad to have this awesome conversation with you. It was definitely in depth. I hope
Yep,
to do it again.
absolutely. I hope that somebody was helped by it and that you all have a good night's sleep and God bless. In Jesus' name, we will see you later and I love you. Good night.
Bye. Have a great time.